In a world shattered by disaster gates, betrayal cuts deeper than any blade. Once a hero, a sword god, Suho fought to protect humanity. But now, he faces the impossible, betrayal from those he trusted most. Even in his final moments, he refuses to give in. But endings aren't always the end. Suho wakes up in the past, during humanity's darkest time. Given one last chance to change his destiny, Suho must rise again, stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. The gates still stand. His legend begins again. One man, one mission, a world to save. Now the story begins. In a mountain landscape, under bright daylight, a group of people stood together, staring at a lone figure lying before them. And Suho, a swordsman, was on the ground, holding his broken sword. He was visibly tired, his body bruised and poisoned, his breathing heavy. He looked up at the people he had once trusted most, frustration clear in his eyes. One of them muttered, mocking Suho's attempt to stay strong despite his broken sword. Nearby, Alex Morgan, a warrior, looked at him with a sense of regret. He thought it would have been easier if Suho had just joined them from the start. But he knew how stubborn people in Suho's position could be. Next to him, a girl, Suzuki Endo, a mage holding a staff glowing with dark energy, spoke with contempt. She criticized the difference in talent and ability between her and someone like Suho, who she sarcastically called a sword god. She also mentioned she didn't like men in suits, clearly showing her dislike for people like him. Suho looked at them, the pain in his eyes showing. His thoughts drifted back to the times they fought together, celebrating victories, feeling triumphant and smiling. And now, they stood against him, as if everything they had done together meant nothing. "We've been fighting together all this time," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. He demanded to know how they could betray him, how they could turn their backs on everything they had achieved. His voice became louder, more desperate as he pleaded for answers. Isabella, the healer of the group, spoke with a flat expression. She said it was unfortunate, but unavoidable. Suho was the only one opposing the current plan, the one who refused to follow along. Suho asked if they weren't ashamed of betraying everything they had fought for. He reminded them that they had already conquered one of the 5 disaster gates. If they took down the remaining 4, humanity would be safe, free from the constant threat of monsters. But now, they wanted to abandon that gate and leave humanity in danger. Suho couldn't understand how they could choose such a path. He accused them, saying they were no different from the monsters they had fought. Hexhood, the group's archer, responded calmly. He pointed out that at least they hadn't killed any humans. He explained that if all the gates were conquered, hunters like them would lose their purpose. Once seen as heroes, they would be nothing more than thugs in the eyes of the people. Hex then spoke directly to Suho, suggesting that Suho wouldn't want to become someone people feared. He tried to persuade him one last time, offering his hand and telling him to join them. Suho's face twisted with anger. He felt betrayed, and Hex's words only deepened his pain. After everything they had done together, Hex expected him to just join them as if nothing had happened. Suho rejected the offer, glaring at the group defiantly. Inside, he knew he didn't have much time. His body was poisoned by Suzuki's venom, and his wounds were too severe to heal. He understood he wouldn't survive this fight. There was only one thing left he could do. If he couldn't live, he would at least take one of them down to help ensure humanity's future. With this thought, he gripped his broken sword, a fire of determination lighting his weary eyes. His last duty as a hero, he decided, would be to sacrifice himself, even if it meant taking just one enemy with him. The group tensed as they sensed his resolve. Energy began swirling around him, his power building as he stepped forward with purpose. Alex, standing with the group, was visibly confused, while Suzuki tried to calm everyone down. She dismissed Suho, saying he was just bluffing. After all, he was just a swordsman with a broken weapon. But Hex wasn't so sure. Something felt different. There was something about Suho's energy that made him uneasy. The tension in the air became thick, and suddenly, with a burst of power, Suho moved. His sword cut through the air with deadly speed. The attack was swift and brutal, catching the group off guard. Suzuki was struck down instantly, her body falling lifelessly to the ground, while Alex screamed in agony as his arms were severed from his body. Hex acted quickly, narrowly avoiding Suho's strike and pulling Isabella to safety. He marveled at the speed of the attack, realizing that if he had been even a moment slower, he would have met the same fate. He couldn't understand how Suho was able to strike with such power. His sword was broken, and his body was poisoned. It didn't make sense. Alex, holding his left arm, his face twisted in pain, struggled to cope with the agony of losing his limb. Isabella rushed to Alex's side, her hands glowing with healing magic. But something was wrong. She looked at his wound in shock. She couldn't heal it. Her eyes widened as the truth hit her. She had heard of it before, but she had never seen it. The wound caused by Suho was beyond healing. It wasn't something magic could fix. It was a power that surpassed the human realm. The injury was too great for any spell to mend. Suho, battered and drained of energy, looked at his sword. It began to glow, an intense aura surrounding it. Hex, watching from a distance, finally understood. It was an intangible sword, formed purely by willpower. A sword made of energy. Suho felt a grim satisfaction as he realized that he had finally achieved what he had been striving for, the ultimate swordsmanship, even in his final moments. With one last surge of power, he smiled for the final time. Then, he fell, his body disappearing over the edge of the cliff. As he fell, a system notification flashed in his mind, congratulating him for reaching the realm of divine sword unity. The system praised his achievements, listing new abilities and announcing that the player system was rebooting. The world around Suho turned dark as he felt his life slipping away. He had completed his final mission, sacrificing everything to defeat his enemies. But regret lingered in his heart. He felt the cold, inevitable pull of death. Suddenly, the darkness faded, replaced by a blinding light. The light took the form of a city, one far different from the battle-worn cliffs where he had just met his end. Suho opened his eyes, disoriented. It wasn't the afterlife he had expected. Instead, it was a bustling, chaotic urban city. A firefighter appeared in his vision, his voice tense but urgent. The man told Suho that he was injured and insisted on taking him to a safe zone. When the firefighter mentioned a gate outbreak, Suho's eyes widened in surprise. He thought for sure he had died back in that dungeon. As Suho was carried through the streets, he looked around, confused. Tall buildings towered over him, but the destruction was unmistakable. A massive explosion rumbled in the distance, sending debris flying across the street. He glanced at a station sign, and the name, Cinderim, flashed before him. The name struck him hard. Cinderim Station was once a location lost to a gate outbreak, contaminated during one of humanity's darkest times. Yet here he was, witnessing the same catastrophe all over again. As he struggled to understand his situation, a goblin appeared from the shadows of the gate. Suho murmured the words, Cinderim Station Gate Outbreak, under his breath, feeling the sheer impossibility of it all. Then, out of nowhere, an arrow sliced through the air, striking the firefighter carrying him. The man let out a strangled cry, collapsing to the ground. The chaos around them grew louder, goblins shrieking, their voices swallowed by the sounds of battle. The firefighter urged Suho to run, pointing to the safe zone he had mentioned. Suho's eyes narrowed, ready to face whatever came next. He spotted an axe nearby, leaning against a pile of debris. Without thinking twice, he grabbed it. He knew he had to act fast. There was no time to hesitate, not now. Despite the firefighter's frantic warnings, Suho swung the axe with effortless precision, honed from countless battles, and took down the goblin in one clean strike. Afterward, Suho glanced at his hands, expecting to see wounds or feel pain. But there was nothing. His hands were steady and unbroken. A sudden realization hit him. This was just like before, like when he had first awakened as a player. A system notification appeared in his mind, the words glowing brightly. It congratulated him for meeting the awakening conditions and urged him to become stronger. Suho let out a laugh, filled with disbelief and amusement. The situation felt strangely familiar. Around him, the city was in ruins, with chaos unfolding everywhere. Another notification popped up, this time offering him a choice. A digital screen appeared in front of him, with 4 glowing options: warrior, mage, archer, and healer. He stared at the choices, memories flooding back. He had faced this same decision before, long ago. Back then, he had chosen the path of a warrior without hesitation. Now, he found himself standing at the same crossroad again. Suho thought back to everything that had led him to this point. His instincts urged him to pick warrior again, but something held him back. Finally, he spoke aloud, asking the system to delay his selection. There was a different path to take this time, and Suho wasn't sure which direction his future would lead him. As the chaos of the city raged on around him, the firefighter called out, desperate to pull him away from the danger. But Suho stayed rooted in place. He assured the firefighter there was no need to worry. He could handle the goblins on his own. They were just goblins after all. The firefighter hesitated but then stepped back. The goblins, with their glowing eyes and crude weapons, approached menacingly. Suho stood tall, ready for them. He unleashed his power, charging at the goblins with the same unyielding determination he had always shown. His movements were quick, his focus sharp as he ran down a burning street, dodging attacks from the goblins with precision. Every step carried the weight of his past experiences, his body reacting instinctively as he avoided their blows. He spotted a red axe amidst the debris, grabbed it, and swung it fiercely at the nearest goblin. The creature fell, and Suho's resolve only grew stronger. He was ready for more. With a determined leap, he attacked another goblin, cutting through it with powerful, precise strikes. It was as if Suho had become a force of nature, his movements fluid and unstoppable. It truly was Goblin Slayer time. Standing over the fallen creatures, Suho remained calm and composed. He muttered to himself that goblins were only a threat to beginners. They were nothing to someone like him. He spotted a goblin sword nearby, testing its weight in his hands before declaring his intent to cut down every one of them. The battle that followed was fierce as Suho moved swiftly, his strikes powerful and precise. With each swing of the sword, goblins fell one after another, their attempts to resist futile. Soon, the battlefield was silent, the only sound his heavy breathing. As he stood among the fallen, Suho realized his anger hadn't fully subsided. He had gotten carried away in the heat of battle. He reminded himself to stay calm. He couldn't afford to let emotions cloud his judgment. Looking around, a thought struck him. This wasn't just another fight. He had somehow returned to the past. This was an opportunity, a fresh start. Suddenly, several holographic panels appeared in front of him, displaying his achievements and skills. He saw basic swordsmanship skills listed, ones he hadn't thought about in a long time. Suho allowed himself a small smile, reminiscing about the early days of his journey. It was like starting over completely. The goblin sword in his hand was shorter than he would have liked, but it would work for now. At that moment, the firefighter cautiously approached him, still visibly shaken by the recent events. The firefighter stammered, asking if Suho was a player. Suho nodded, answering calmly, yes. After everything that had just happened, he already knew the answer to that question. He made his selection on the holographic screen, the system offering him a choice of powers. This time, he chose the healer class. A confirmation screen appeared, congratulating him on his decision. Suho was granted bonus stats and a new skill, Healing Light F. He turned his attention back to the firefighter, noticing the man's injuries. He approached the firefighter, inspecting his wounds, and gently placed a hand on the man's shoulder. The firefighter was confused but didn't pull away. A soft blue aura enveloped them both, signaling the activation of Suho's healing ability. Slowly, the firefighter's wounds began to heal. His eyes widened in shock as the pain faded. The firefighter struggled to find words, his voice full of disbelief. He asked if Suho was really a healer, and Suho, with a faint smile, replied, "I guess that's who I am now." Another system notification appeared, offering Suho a reward for using his healing skill. He was presented with an option to choose a weapon from the system's arsenal. Suho took a moment to think. Even though he had chosen the healer class, he still needed a weapon for combat. He summoned a glowing sword from the system's arsenal. It was a basic beginner's sword, but it would do for now. Suho examined it thoughtfully. There was still much to accomplish, and his journey was only beginning. He looked at the distant gate looming ahead, his resolve hardening. He announced his intent to go and conquer it. The firefighter, alarmed, tried to stop Suho, warning him of the dangers ahead. But Suho remained unshaken. He assured the firefighter that there was something to gain from this, a purpose he needed to fulfill. As Suho confidently walked toward the gate, memories flooded his mind. He remembered his past triumphs, the skills he had honed through years of hard work and perseverance. Just like before, the abilities gained through talent were still with him, no matter the class he chose. But he also recalled the skills tied specifically to each class, like healing magic, which only a healer could wield. He remembered Isabella's Holy Spirit Light, which had started as the basic healing light. If only he had been able to heal himself back then, things might have ended differently. This time, Suho knew it had to be different. He would be both a swordsman and a healer, perhaps even a paladin. That was the path he would walk now. He would prevent the mistakes of his past and become stronger than those who had betrayed him. As he stood before the gate, his mind lingered on the faces of his former allies. Their indifferent expressions haunted him, reminding him of how things had turned out. He had to acquire skills faster, level up quicker, if he was to surpass his past self. This gate, a premonition gate, had nearly cost him his life before. But now he was ready. His skill level might be low for now, and the challenges ahead might seem overwhelming. But that was fine. The swordsmanship engraved in his memory remained strong. Suho was determined to start over and overcome his limitations. With fire in his eyes, he stepped toward the glowing, colorful portal. The past had given him a second chance, and he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. It was time to rewrite his story. Suho walked cautiously through the dense, wet forest, his steps muffled by the soft ground beneath him. He moved slowly, eyes scanning his surroundings with careful precision, alert for any danger lurking in the shadows. The thick foliage brushed against his body as he advanced, and then he noticed something, a creature lying motionless on the ground. It was a goblin, its body lifeless, a sign of the chaos that had unfolded here. He muttered to himself that the goblins, which had once been rampaging outside the gate as if they owned the world, were now all dead inside. It seemed the goblins had fled through the gate, escaping from something far more terrifying. Suddenly, a noise broke the stillness, and Suho froze. His eyes sharpened, focusing on the source of the sound, ready for whatever danger might come next. Suho's instincts proved right. The reason behind the goblins' frantic retreat soon became clear. Two hobgoblins emerged from the shadows, their eyes burning with hostility. One was level 10, the other level 12. Their bright red skin and muscular frames made them stand out as far more dangerous than regular goblins. They glared at Suho, ready to claim him as their next prey, replacing the goblins they had just hunted. Suho smiled, unfazed by their aggressive presence. To him, they were still just goblins, no matter their size or the aura of menace they carried. With confidence, he stepped forward, preparing for the battle. The clash began as Suho met the hobgoblin's powerful strikes with his own. He dodged nimbly, but quickly realized that his sword barely made an impact. Their tough, reinforced skin was too strong for his current level to pierce. Suho knew that relying solely on strength wouldn't work. He had to find a way around their defense. If his physical attacks couldn't break through, he'd have to use his wits. The fight grew fiercer with each passing moment, but Suho focused on finding an opening. He needed to be clever, not just strong. And then he saw his chance. With a powerful leap, he soared into the air, his sword raised high. He aimed for one hobgoblin's vulnerable eye and struck with precision. The creature recoiled in pain and collapsed, falling before Suho could even react. Suho blinked, surprised. He hadn't intended to take it down so quickly, but his instincts had led him to victory. He sighed, reminding himself to be more careful with his force next time. But there was no time to second-guess. The battle wasn't over yet. A massive hobgoblin appeared from the distance, charging toward him. Its massive muscles bulged, and it moved with terrifying speed. Suho's gaze sharpened. This was his chance to push forward. Suho decided to make use of the hobgoblin's aggression. The creature lunged at him with a roar, but Suho dodged effortlessly. As he avoided each strike, he quickly realized he was growing more agile with every movement. His evasion was becoming more fluid, more natural. After several successful dodges, Suho felt a sense of improvement in himself. With each close call, his body moved quicker, more instinctively. The fight was becoming easier, and he knew that these small victories were shaping him into something stronger. Then, as the hobgoblin swung at him again, Suho blocked its blow with a sharp, precise parry. The strike was heavy, but he felt the movement come naturally, and the impact was absorbed perfectly. The hobgoblin paused, momentarily thrown off balance by the effective counter. Suho took a moment to reflect. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was mastering his abilities. With a few more successful parries, Suho felt an undeniable shift in his confidence. He had turned the battle around. Despite being outmatched in strength, he was outmaneuvering his opponent with skill and precision. The hobgoblin seemed to be tiring, its attacks growing slower and more predictable. Suho knew that with this new edge, he had the upper hand. Suho studied his fallen opponent, noting the hobgoblin's unsteady stance. Frustration was evident in its movements, and Suho knew the moment had come to end the battle. With unwavering confidence, he faced the creature, his resolve clear. He had gained the experience he needed, and now, it was time to finish what he had started. With a swift movement, his sword sliced through the air. The hobgoblin let out a strangled cry before collapsing, defeated at Suho's feet. Sunlight streamed through the dense forest, casting a warm glow over the fallen creature. Suho stood over the body, his gaze cold and focused. But there was no time for rest. He knew there were more enemies to face, more challenges ahead. He spoke aloud, his voice steady and resolute. "I'm ready to earn some real experience now." Meanwhile, outside the gate, a group of hunters gathered, their voices filled with annoyance. One of them muttered about someone barging into the gate without permission, their frustration mounting. They speculated about which faction the lone player might belong to, and one joked that if the player ended up dying inside, it would become a legendary tale. Elsewhere, two men in suits stood on a cracked city street, speaking with the firefighter who had encountered Suho. The men seemed confused and irritated, demanding more details about the person who had entered the gate. The firefighter described Suho, how he was a beginner player who had taken on a group of goblins alone and even healed the firefighter's wounds before entering the gate. He repeated Suho's words, that the young man had something to gain from this. The two suited men surveyed the scene around them. Goblin corpses littered the street, the aftermath of a battle they hadn't even been a part of. One of them stood still, staring in disbelief. They hadn't arrived late, yet the goblins had already been dealt with, and the person responsible was, of all things, a healer. The thought seemed almost absurd to them, but the evidence was undeniable. The goblin bodies lay scattered around, proof that a healer had gone into the gate alone and wiped them out. It didn't make sense. One of the men pondered aloud, gazing at the city as his expression grew serious. If all that was inside the gate were just goblins, then the challenge can't be that great. But still, it's strange. He's a healer, yet not a scratch on him. He wiped out all those goblins without breaking a sweat. What exactly is going on? Unease settled over him as he continued to inspect the destruction around him. Something about the situation didn't add up, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the healer than met the eye. The suited man stood amidst the destruction, his mind racing. It felt reckless, almost as if the healer had charged in without a clear plan. But the results spoke volumes. He couldn't ignore what he'd seen. The goblins were dead, and a healer had done it. What if, just what if, this healer succeeded in clearing the gate? What would that mean? Urgency flashed across his features as he turned to a subordinate nearby. His voice was sharp with authority as he issued his orders. Any change in the gate, report it immediately. If anyone emerges, you let me know. No delays. The subordinate nodded, taking off at once, while the suited man pulled out his phone. His mind was made up. If that healer really managed to clear the gate, they couldn't afford to let him slip away. Someone with that kind of potential needed to be brought into the fold, for both their sake and his. As the suited men went about their plans, the scene shifted back to Suho. He was deep in the heart of the forest, the air thick with magic and danger. His sword danced through the air, slashing down hobgoblins with precision, each strike cutting through them like a knife through butter. His movements were fluid, effortless, as bodies fell around him in quick succession. As he moved, he spotted one hobgoblin, its stance shaky, fear apparent in its eyes. Suho paused, a hint of amusement flickering in his gaze. He didn't need to kill this one. Instead, he decided to give it a chance to run. "Go ahead," he muttered, his voice cold but oddly casual. "Bring more of your friends." The hobgoblin screeched, its terror overwhelming any remnants of pride. It turned and fled into the depths of the forest, leaving Suho standing, watching it disappear into the shadows. Without missing a beat, Suho turned his attention inward. He opened his status window, inspecting his attributes with a critical eye. His goal was simple: balance. He'd learned that from experience. Raising all his stats evenly seemed to be the most logical approach, ensuring that no weakness could be exploited. He applied the bonus points, watching his stats rise as the numbers shifted. He noticed how quickly he was leveling up. The monsters here were nothing like the challenges he'd faced before, but the speed at which he was gaining experience was a small reminder of how far he'd come. The list of skills that had appeared was a testament to his growing power: throw, sidestep, and others, each a building block of the warrior he had once been, now reinforced by the healing abilities he had embraced. His gaze shifted downward, focusing on the bodies of the fallen hobgoblins. He searched with purpose, eyes narrowing as he scanned for something valuable. And there it was, a faintly glowing red crystal. A degrade stone. He knelt, picking it up, his expression softening into a small, satisfied smile. It wasn't the most glamorous item, but it had its uses, especially now. He estimated it could fetch about 50,000 won, which would be more than enough for a start. As he pocketed the stone, his attention drifted back to the area around him. He wasn't alone for long. A slight rustle in the trees caught his ear, and his body tensed instinctively. He raised his weapon, eyes scanning the shadows between the trees. More enemies were closing in, and his instincts told him this would be no ordinary fight. The hobgoblins were back, this time in greater numbers. As the shadows coalesced into shapes, Suho counted them. 30 or so hobgoblins, their eyes gleaming red, each one more dangerous than the last. His lips curved into a wry smile. The real fight was about to begin. "Perfect," Suho muttered to himself, readying his sword. "Time to level up before the boss shows up." The hobgoblins advanced, their growls filling the air as they circled him. It was exactly the kind of challenge he had been hoping for: more experience, more skills to master, and perhaps, just maybe, a chance to test his new healing abilities in battle. He gripped his sword tighter, prepared to take on the swarm that was fast closing in. This time he would be ready. The hobgoblins charged at Suho, but he stood his ground and faced them directly. With skill and speed, he avoided their attacks while striking back with deadly precision. His hits were strong, and his sword easily cut through his enemies. The hobgoblins didn't stop attacking, but Suho stayed calm. He moved like a force of nature, focused on ending the fight quickly. One by one, the hobgoblins fell, each letting out a painful scream before collapsing. During the battle, a new, powerful attack came at him. A bigger hobgoblin joined the fight, swinging a massive axe toward him. Suho smiled and easily blocked the strike. This was the one he had been waiting for. The giant hobgoblin, with a twisted face and dark presence, stepped forward. The forest around them turned a red, eerie color. Suho's eyes locked on the creature as a system notification appeared in front of him. Chief Hobgoblin Level 20. He stood tall, drawing his sword with confidence. The time had come to face the boss monster. Suho stayed calm, a small smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. He was ready. This battle was just the start of his plan to change his fate. His focus was clear: to grow stronger and rewrite his story. Suho looked at the chief hobgoblin, feeling the tension in the air, as if the whole place was waiting for the fight to begin. Without hesitation, he moved to face the hobgoblin chief, and the clash started immediately. Suho moved fast, matching every attack with perfect timing. The chief hobgoblin was fierce, swinging its weapons with brutal strength, but Suho remained calm, listening to its desperate roars. When a regular hobgoblin tried to sneak up behind him, Suho effortlessly dodged and countered with quick, accurate strikes. The forest echoed with the sound of clashing swords and the cries of the fallen demons. Suho thought that these hobgoblins were nothing but weaklings. He didn't want them to interrupt his real fight. As he defeated each one, he found it almost amusing. These creatures were no challenge for him. But then the atmosphere changed when the chief hobgoblin used a special skill. Suddenly, Suho felt his whole body freeze as the system announced that the chief hobgoblin had used a fear skill. The heavy feeling wrapped around him like chains, locking his muscles. Suho realized the danger. The higher the enemy's level, the stronger the fear effect became. It was a skill designed to paralyze him, to stop him completely. Suho gritted his teeth, realizing he had nothing in his inventory to counteract such mental attacks. No skills. No items. But Suho refused to be weak. Even without any special abilities, he knew how to overcome it. His eyes grew steely as he made a choice, gripping his sword so tightly that his hands began to bleed. The pain shocked him back into reality, and his body responded as he forced himself to move. The system announced that he had broken free from the fear, and Suho felt his determination return. He quickly dodged a narrow attack from the chief hobgoblin and struck back with a fast counter. The creature seemed stunned by his strength, but Suho didn't hesitate. He swiftly finished off the remaining smaller hobgoblins, one by one. The system confirmed that all the hobgoblins had been defeated. Standing in the aftermath, Suho used his healing energy. The forest briefly glowed with a warm light as the healing energy surrounded him, restoring his body. But Suho knew this was just the beginning. The real fight was still ahead. The chief hobgoblin reappeared, its dangerous aura unmistakable, its weapon reflecting the dim light. Suho stared at it, showing no fear in his calm expression. He was ready for a one-on-one fight, just the two of them. The battle was fierce, with both combatants giving it everything they had. Suho noticed the level difference was an issue. His attacks weren't causing much damage. Suho stayed focused on the chief, knowing that each hit mattered and that the small injuries he inflicted would slowly wear down the creature. His sword gleamed slightly as he gathered his energy, preparing for a decisive strike. He aimed for the weak points, taking advantage of the wounds he'd already caused. With a powerful lunge, he drove his sword deep into the hobgoblin. The creature cried out in pain, but it still tried to use its fear skill. Suho was beyond that now. He had already beaten fear once, and it couldn't control him again. He kept attacking, delivering blow after blow with unwavering determination. His expression was one of fierce resolve. With one final, powerful strike, Suho finished the battle. The chief hobgoblin's face showed shock as it collapsed. But Suho wasn't finished yet. He used his healing energy to bring the monster back to life, forcing it to fight him once more. He repeated this process, fighting the creature over and over until he felt satisfied, until his skills had been perfected. The system notified him of his progress. Many of his skills had leveled up, and his strength had increased. Suho looked at his hands, feeling the new power coursing through him. The time had come for the hobgoblin's role to end. With a grim smile, Suho struck the final blow, decapitating the creature. The system confirmed his victory. The chief hobgoblin was dead, the gate had been conquered, and Suho was named the MVP. He felt a surge of energy as he leveled up, all his stats improved, and he received bonus points. Multiple screens appeared before him, announcing new skills and abilities. His healing light had been upgraded, and a new skill, Cure, had been added. Suho allowed himself a small smile. Now, he no longer needed to fear status ailments. Eventually, he'd become strong enough to cure even the deadliest poisons. He looked at the glowing mana stone from the fallen boss, feeling satisfied. He had taken everything he needed from this place. It was time to move on. His thoughts wandered to the familiar faces he hadn't seen in a long while. A feeling of anticipation stirred inside him. Outside the gate, the world was in chaos. People gathered below, their faces a mix of fear and awe as the gate trembled. Whispers of uncertainty spread through the crowd as a bright light appeared, and a figure began to step out. All eyes were on the gate, wondering who or what was emerging. Suho walked out of the gate with confidence, his presence exuding a strong and mysterious energy. The people around him murmured in amazement. They wondered if he had really conquered the gate alone. The crowd was filled with disbelief, and the question of whether he had truly been by himself echoed throughout. Many scouts hurriedly approached Suho, trying to get his attention. They introduced themselves as members of the Immortal Guild, another from the Warang Guild, all eager to recruit him. But Suho ignored them, jumping down and landing smoothly before the crowd. He moved forward with purpose, heading toward a man in a suit, extending his hand confidently. The man looked confused by the sudden interaction. Suho greeted him, and it turned out that the man was ᴄᴏᴘᴘыឫ, the team leader of the South Korean Hunter Association. Another man in a suit, standing beside ᴄᴏᴘᴘ, asked if he knew Suho, but ᴄᴏᴘᴘ admitted that he had no idea who this person was. He was genuinely confused. Later, as the sun began to set, the scene shifted to a large building marked as the South Korean Hunter Association. Inside an office, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ sat at his desk, facing Suho. ᴄᴏᴘ appeared lost in thought, trying to remember their first meeting. He recalled when Suho had greeted him confidently and shook his hand. Suho introduced himself and mentioned that he had business with the association, specifically that he was planning to get a hunter's license. ᴄᴏᴘ was taken aback. Issuing a hunter's license was a serious process, and from what he could gather, this wasn't just a renewal. It seemed that Suho was an unregistered hunter. ᴄᴏᴘ's mind raced as he thought about what that meant. Suho was a newly awakened player, and considering his abilities, it was surprising. The healer class was often seen as the weakest among the 4 main class categories, yet Suho had managed to conquer a gate on his own. As ᴄᴏᴘ examined Suho's hunter aptitude test results, they appeared more like those of a warrior than a healer. This caught his interest. Suho, calm and casual, ate something while waiting for ᴄᴏᴘ's response. Noticing ᴄᴏᴘ's hesitation as he looked over the results, Suho asked if there was a problem. ᴄᴏᴘ reassured him, saying there was nothing to worry about. He confirmed Suho's name, on Suho, and began asking about his background. ᴄᴏᴘ was curious about what Suho had done before becoming a hunter. Suho explained that he was a college dropout. When ᴄᴏᴘ probed further, Suho admitted he hadn't done well in college. He smiled lightly, making the statement seem less serious. ᴄᴏᴘ wondered if he had been a medical student, but Suho revealed that he had studied physical education instead. This only confused ᴄᴏᴘ further. Usually, healers came from medical backgrounds, so it was unusual for someone with a physical education background to choose the healer path. ᴄᴏᴘ then asked why Suho had chosen healing over becoming a warrior or an archer. Suho smiled again and said it was because he hated getting hurt. His answer was simple but unexpected, and ᴄᴏᴘ couldn't help but find it amusing. His curiosity grew, and he couldn't hold back any longer. He asked Suho how he had managed to conquer the gate alone. Suho thought back to the events, remembering his battle with the hobgoblin. He explained that there hadn't been much of a plan or strategy. When he entered the gate, a hobgoblin attacked him, and he fought back just to survive. ᴄᴏᴘ was startled when he heard the mention of the hobgoblin. Suho confirmed it was a hobgoblin and then opened his inventory. In an instant, glowing magic crystals appeared on the table. Suho explained that he had obtained them by killing not just a hobgoblin, but also its chief. He admitted that he didn't really know the value of these magic crystals and asked ᴄᴏᴘ to handle them. ᴄᴏᴘ, still processing everything he had just heard, agreed to take care of it. He picked up one of the crystals and began preparing it for processing, his shock still lingering, but he focused on the task at hand. ᴄᴏᴘ then turned to Suho and asked if he was truly committed to becoming a hunter. Suho confidently confirmed that he was. He had made that decision the moment he awakened as a player. ᴄᴏᴘ couldn't help but comment on how significant that decision was. But in his mind, he felt it was somewhat impulsive. He asked Suho if there was a specific reason behind his choice. Suho smiled and noticed that ᴄᴏᴘ wasn't very good at hiding his thoughts. The conversation grew more serious as Suho explained his reasons for wanting to become a hunter. He told ᴄᴏᴘ that he had lost his entire family due to gate shock. Suho hated monsters and gates deeply. He believed becoming a hunter was his way of fighting back. He admitted that entering the gate alone had been an emotional choice, driven by his desire to relieve his own frustration. However, killing the monsters hadn't given him the peace he sought. The pain in his heart was still there. Suho realized that his true purpose was more than just killing monsters. He wanted to make sure no one else would have to suffer the way he had. He wanted to protect people from losing their loved ones to monsters. With a serious expression, he stated that he wanted to work for everyone's safety. ᴄᴏᴘ looked at Suho with a sense of awe. Suho's determination was clear. He wasn't just becoming a hunter for personal gain, but for the greater good. His expression was firm, signaling that this decision was final. ᴄᴏᴘ explained that becoming a part of the Hunter Association meant living as a civil servant hunter. He pointed out, with a slight hesitation, that their pay was much lower compared to what hunters made in private guilds. It wasn't just a small difference. The pay was significantly lower. Suho listened attentively, his expression calm but resolute. When it was his turn to speak, Suho made it clear that he already knew about the lower pay. But for him, what mattered more than money was something else. He valued the free access to various gates, the priority to conquer them, and the authority that came with being part of the South Korean Hunter Association. He also wanted the power to impose strict punishments for player crimes, something only the association could truly offer. ᴄᴏᴘ blinked in surprise at Suho's words, genuinely curious. He asked what exactly Suho meant by wanting those privileges. ᴄᴏᴘ thought to himself that most people would probably prefer to work in an office rather than go out and conquer gates. He leaned back, surprised by what he was hearing, and wondered aloud if such things were even possible. ᴄᴏᴘ clarified that while the Hunter Association did have the rights to conquer various gates, those rights were often auctioned off to private guilds. The reasoning was simple. There was no logic in risking one's life to attack dangerous gates for a low government salary. He continued, saying that people often viewed becoming a hunter civil servant as a form of altruism. However, most people pursued the civil servant hunter role for the stability it offered, choosing administrative work over actually entering gates. ᴄᴏᴘ explained that most civil servants would do anything to avoid the gates, but Suho was different. Suho wasn't just interested in stability or pay. He spoke passionately about public safety and was clearly someone willing to work directly in the field. ᴄᴏᴘ found himself in awe. He saw Suho as the perfect civil servant hunter, someone who truly cared about protecting people, a real embodiment of patriotism. He was exactly what the association needed. ᴄᴏᴘ couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Half-jokingly, he admitted that he was so happy it almost made him dizzy. Suho, noticing ᴄᴏᴘ's reaction, leaned forward with concern and asked if he was all right. ᴄᴏᴘ quickly composed himself, cleared his throat, and adjusted his posture. He confessed that it had been a long time since he'd met someone like Suho. He assured him he would handle the paperwork and identification needed. ᴄᴏᴘ then explained that to officially join, Suho would need to complete the hunter exam, which included an aptitude test, a written exam, and a practical exam. However, there was a catch. ᴄᴏᴘ's expression shifted slightly as he explained that registration for the current year's exam had already closed, and the exam day was actually tomorrow. Suho's eyes widened in shock. But before Suho could fully worry, ᴄᴏᴘ remained calm and smiled confidently. He reassured Suho that if he was interested, he could still register him as an exception. Suho's face lit up with excitement, and he quickly asked if that was really possible. ᴄᴏᴘ nodded, explaining that it was allowed within the existing rules. Since Suho had conquered a gate alone, they could report it to the higher-ups and get approval for his late registration. ᴄᴏᴘ then became more serious. He admitted that he recommended Suho because of his clear talent, but he also pointed out the challenge ahead. He explained that preparing for both the written and practical exams in just one day would be tough. While ᴄᴏᴘ wasn't concerned about Suho's physical performance, given his impressive skills, he did have doubts about the written part. Suho clenched his fist, showing his determination. ᴄᴏᴘ, still concerned, repeated his worry about the written exam, but Suho leaned forward, his voice strong and confident. He asked ᴄᴏᴘ to go ahead and register him, assuring him that he was ready for the challenge. ᴄᴏᴘ blinked in surprise but nodded, impressed by Suho's resolve. Suho continued, saying that it was a good idea to take the exam at least once for the experience, especially with the chance he had now. He added that it was just a test, and even if he failed, he could always take it again next time. ᴄᴏᴘᴘ couldn't help but admire Suho's bravery. With a slight smirk, he shook his head and remarked on what a brave man Suho was. ᴄᴏᴘᴘ then informed Suho that he could check his aptitude test result today. Suho thanked him for the information but hesitated for a moment before admitting that he didn't have the money for the registration fees. Suho asked if ᴄᴏᴘᴘ could handle the magic crystal transaction right away. ᴄᴏᴘᴘ nodded quickly, adjusting his tie, and promised to take care of it while also checking Suho's aptitude test. As ᴄᴏᴘᴘ left to complete the necessary steps, the atmosphere softened, and Suho found himself reflecting inwardly. His face grew thoughtful as he looked at ᴄᴏᴘ's retreating back. Suho realized that even now, ᴄᴏᴘ was the only person he could truly trust. A grateful smile spread across his face, and he silently thanked ᴄᴏᴘ. A while later, the two sat together, sharing a meal. ᴄᴏᴘ announced that all the aptitude tests were finished, and the money from the magic crystal had been deposited. Suho, still in awe, couldn't believe the amount when he saw it, around 3 million won. He took a sip from his drink and playfully remarked on it. ᴄᴏᴘ, a bit embarrassed, admitted that as a civil servant hunter, he received certain tax exemption benefits for magic crystals. Suho's eyes widened, impressed, and eagerly asked if it was really duty-free. Then, with a hopeful expression, he asked if he could ask one more favor. ᴄᴏᴘ, curious, asked what it was. Suho explained that he had heard the association had a library containing workbooks and reference materials for the upcoming test. Even though it was late and the test was tomorrow, Suho felt the need to cram as much as possible. He hesitated for a moment, then asked if it would be all right for him to study in the library. ᴄᴏᴘ's face lit up and he grinned enthusiastically, raising both of their drinks in excitement. He eagerly told Suho that, of course, he could use the library. Suho's face brightened in response, and he thanked ᴄᴏᴘ once again. The next scene unfolded in a brightly lit library, where ᴄᴏᴘ proudly gestured at the vast collection of books. He informed Suho that he didn't need an employee card when he left, so Suho was free to study there as long as he needed. With a cheerful wave, ᴄᴏᴘ wished him the best of luck on his test tomorrow and walked away, leaving Suho in quiet contemplation among the towering shelves. As ᴄᴏᴘ walked off, Suho watched him, his gaze softening with a mixture of admiration and guilt. He muttered to himself that brother ᴄᴏᴘ was still the same, kind and trustworthy, always there for him. Suho thought that ᴄᴏᴘ didn't know yet, but one day, he would become the president of the association. Suho sighed, admitting it had been hard pretending not to know anything. It felt like he'd been teasing ᴄᴏᴘ, but he also knew that acting like he already knew everything would only raise suspicions. He rose from his seat, his expression hardening with determination, as he walked deeper into the library. The sunset cast a warm, golden glow through the library windows, illuminating the rows of tall shelves. Suho whispered to himself that it was time to find what he was looking for. As Suho moved through the labyrinthine aisles of the library, scanning the spines of countless books, his mind wandered back to the major events that would unfold in the future. He knew the general outline, but he also knew he couldn't remember every single detail. After all, he was still human. He came to a particular shelf and stopped, pulling out a large, ancient-looking tome that had intricate patterns etched into its cover. He couldn't help but comment on how massive the book was. Suho opened it, revealing pages filled with cryptic symbols and foreign text. He recalled how he had once tried to extract information from this very book before. As his eyes skimmed the pages, something strange happened. The text began to glow softly, and a message appeared. The system informed him that the book was from another world. Suho focused on the words, noting that a single sentence had appeared, along with hints of different ways to interact with the book. With a mix of awe and concentration, Suho raised the book above his head, an aura of mystery surrounding him as the symbols shimmered. He then placed the book on his head, as it was said to be the way to use it. But after a few moments, frustration showed on his face. Why wasn't it working? He had been told this was the method, yet nothing seemed to happen. Just then, a notification popped up, and the system's voice announced that the Library of Memories was interested in his story. The book's pages began to turn on their own, glowing with a purple light that illuminated the entire room. The system's message continued, stating that the Library of Memories was inviting him. The book released an intense magical glow, and Suho stared in awe, sensing the magnitude of the moment. Finally, the system declared, "Welcome to the Library of Memories." The Library of Memories opened before Suho, and its grand book radiated a wave of shimmering magic that filled the entire space with blinding light. Suho stood still, fully aware of the significance of what was about to happen. This book was an artifact with the power to make a person remember everything they had seen and heard, including the painful memories that most people would choose to forget. Suho knew well that the human mind relied on the process of forgetting to survive. Endless vivid memories could easily become overwhelming. But Suho was willing to shoulder that burden. He knew that obtaining the Library of Memories came with a price, the curse of remembering everything. Yet, that curse was exactly what he needed. He was ready to take on even the most painful memories if it meant achieving his goals. He recalled the girl who was originally meant to acquire the skill, the one who was supposed to become the Hexagon Guild manager. She had once worked for the Korean Hunter Association before joining the Hexagon Guild. Suho remembered the story of how she had accidentally obtained the skill of the Library of Memories. Late one night, while studying in the library, she had used the book as a pillow, simply because sleeping face down was uncomfortable. It had been an innocent mistake, but it had forever changed her life. By sheer chance, she had gained the ability. Suho thought back to how he had learned about it from her, and a small smile tugged at his lips. He already planned to treat her to a meal the next time they met. She deserved at least that much. Without warning, a glowing system notification popped up before him, asking if he would be willing to donate his story to the Library of Memories. Suho paused for a moment, considering the immense power now within his reach. The library had the ability to store everything, even the small, overlooked moments of his past that would normally be lost to time. Suho clenched his fist, making up his mind to accept the offer. In an instant, a brilliant light surrounded him as the library began to record his story. Books floated around him, their covers glowing with strange symbols. The entire space hummed with an almost living energy, filled with the magic of countless untold tales. A message appeared in front of him, confirming the activation of the skill. The system explained that the Library of Memories would retain all the memories he had experienced, allowing him to revisit them at will. It would also suggest relevant information whenever necessary. Suho grimaced slightly, feeling an unfamiliar sensation flood his mind. The recording process was unlike anything he had ever felt before, disorienting, as if his very consciousness was being rearranged. He steadied himself, taking a deep breath. Wondering if the odd sensation was because the space around him was merely illusionary, he decided to test the skill. He focused on his past, and in an instant, the world around him dissolved into a swirling vortex of memories. The images of his last battle came rushing back to him, raw and intense. He could still feel the pain, the fury, the adrenaline coursing through him as though it was happening all over again. He thought about the final moments, the emotions still fresh in his mind. The memories accelerated. He saw the betrayal of those he had once called comrades, their faces twisted in hatred and greed. The memories were vivid, painful, and disturbingly real. Suho clenched his teeth, his eyes narrowing as the images of those traitors who had delayed the gate's destruction for their own gain flashed before him. Their cold, indifferent expressions burned in his mind. He swore to never forget them. His eyes hardened with the weight of the betrayal, and a faint scowl crossed his face. The experience was unpleasant, and Suho cursed himself for not thinking of a better memory to relive. As he sat in the uncomfortable aftermath, a new interface suddenly appeared before him. A cryptic message from the system caught his attention. He frowned, puzzled by the unfamiliar notification. What was this? He squinted at the message, confusion spreading across his features. Then the interface shifted, and a new announcement flashed. The system informed him that it would grant him the opportunity to become stronger as the first to reach the realm of the transcendent, but only if he allowed the system to reboot his player status. Suho stood tall, his figure framed by the swirling light. The word rebooting echoed in his ears, sending a chill through his spine. It was almost impossible to believe. As the light slowly faded, Suho found himself back in the vast, quiet library. The shelves around Suho glimmered with latent power, the weight of countless lives and experiences filling the air. As the realization sank in, he nodded slowly to himself. The system had sent him back to the past. He recalled his previous journey, reaching the unity of the divine sword, acquiring his first SS-grade skill, and now, here he was again at the starting point. His fingers brushed his chin as he fell into deep thought. Since he was the first to reach the transcendent state, the system was giving him another shot, something that had never even crossed his mind before. He paused, wondering if this return to the past was truly a coincidence. His fists clenched, resolve hardening in his chest. Whether by fate or design, he had returned. This time, not only could he prevent the events that had befallen him, but he could also prevent the chaos of the unpredictable gates, which had caused so many casualties in the past. With a deep breath, Suho's gaze sharpened. He had to make the most of this opportunity. The thought crossed his mind that perhaps he could conquer the gates faster this time. He couldn't afford to waste any time. He stepped into a taxi, determination driving every motion. As the taxi sped through the streets, Suho's resolve deepened. Whatever the cause, this was his chance, and he would take full advantage of it. The gates had caused enough damage before. Now, he could stop it from happening. He stepped out of the taxi, his fists tight with determination. He couldn't waste time. Not this time. His gaze hardened with purpose as he walked toward his goal. Soon, Suho stood before a grand building, its lights cutting through the night like a beacon. Nexus. His eyes narrowed as recognition settled in. It was the private hunter academy, Nexus. He had arrived. Inside the brightly lit reception area, Suho walked confidently up to the front desk. The receptionist looked up from her work with a smile, asking what had brought him to the academy that day. Suho replied calmly, stating that he needed to meet Director Kim Soo-ae. The receptionist's eyebrows lifted slightly, a note of surprise in her voice as she asked if he had an appointment. "No," Suho answered simply, "but I need to speak with her." The receptionist hesitated for a moment before apologizing, explaining that an appointment was required to meet with the director. Suho thought for a moment, then raised his hand as if an idea had come to him. "Could you just pass along a message?" he asked. "Tell her the solo conqueror of the Sindorum Station pre-catastrophe gate is here." The receptionist's eyes widened in shock. Without missing a beat, she nodded and quickly picked up the phone to call the director. The scene shifted, transitioning to a hallway leading toward a door labeled Director's Office. Inside, Director Kim Soo-ae stood behind a sleek desk, her presence composed and elegant. She greeted Suho with a polite nod as he entered. "I'm Kim Soo-ae, Director of Nexus Academy," she introduced herself, gesturing for him to sit. Suho returned the greeting and sat across from her. There was a slight air of awkwardness between them, but also an unspoken curiosity. After a beat, Director Kim spoke first, acknowledging the news she had heard about him, the solo conqueror of the Sindorum pre-catastrophe gate. She asked what had brought him to Nexus. Suho didn't hesitate. He explained that he had come to request a scholarship. Director Kim's eyebrows rose in surprise. Suho continued, mentioning that there was a hunter license test the following day, and he planned to take it. The director appeared momentarily startled, her interest piqued. "How long has it been since your awakening?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of curiosity. When Suho told Director Kim that he had awakened just that very day, her eyes widened in disbelief. She quickly began flipping through the documents on her desk, as though trying to make sense of the information she had just received. Her voice stumbled for a moment, caught between surprise and confusion. "So, you're an unregistered hunter," she began, as if confirming the facts with herself, "who awakened today, and you intend to take the hunter license test tomorrow? And you're also the solo raider of the pre-catastrophe gate in Sindorum." Suho nodded, his expression calm and steady, confirming that she had understood correctly. As he did, his thoughts drifted back to the connection he had at the Hunter Association, someone who had made it possible for him to register for the test despite the unusual circumstances. Director Kim leaned back in her chair, her gaze sharpening as she observed Suho more closely. There was a weight in the air, an intensity that she didn't often feel with candidates. Suho, without hesitation, made his request clear. He planned to aim for the top position in the test and, if successful, he asked for her to grant him a Nexus scholarship. Suho's confidence didn't falter, and as he spoke, his resolve was palpable. Director Kim's eyes narrowed as she considered the proposal, her thoughts weighing his words carefully. After a beat, she responded with a mix of challenge and intrigue in her voice, her tone implying that if he succeeded, the scholarship would indeed be well earned. The two locked eyes, the room falling into a tense silence. Both Suho and Director Kim seemed to be sizing each other up, each unwilling to back down from the silent challenge that hung in the air. There was a mutual understanding between them, a shared conviction that would shape the path forward. The moment was charged, and Suho knew that this was just the beginning of the journey he had set in motion. Suho spoke with confidence, suggesting that Director Kim should definitely give a scholarship. He seemed sure of himself, even though it might be hard for a complete beginner to come first in the exam. But he wasn't just a beginner, he was an experienced hunter who had already conquered many gates. Now, though, it was up to Director Kim whether she chose to believe him. Director Kim adjusted her glasses and pointed out the difficulties ahead, mentioning that the hunter test was very different from conquering a gate, even if it was something never seen before. She showed Suho a report with statistics about the hunter test, explaining that the average pass rate was under 20%, and this year's pass rate was only 15%. Suho just smiled at this. Then he made a suggestion. If he didn't come in first, she could forget about him and not give him the scholarship. Director Kim paused and then asked him why, out of all the academies like Hexagon and Prime, he had chosen Nexus. Suho explained that he picked Nexus because it was in the most disappointing situation. Director Kim blinked in surprise at this answer. She might have wanted to slap him for his boldness. Suho went on to say that Nexus Academy was the biggest in the country, but recently, it hadn't produced any first or second place winners, and the number of students was dropping. Director Kim sighed, admitting that this was true. As Director Kim adjusted her glasses, she thought about what Suho had said. They really needed to show better results, but there was no outstanding student yet. What if she accepted Suho's offer, and he actually came out on top? The one who conquered the Syndrome Station Gate and passed the Hunter test with the highest score. If news like that spread, Nexus Academy would benefit a lot. It was an attractive idea. Then, there was just one more thing to figure out. Director Kim asked Suho how much money he expected from the scholarship. Suho asked how much the scholarship for the top student was. Director Kim explained that the top student would get a full refund of their tuition fees for the year, plus a 30 million won congratulatory bonus. On top of that, the top student could immediately join the Nexus Guild if they wanted. Suho nodded in approval. It was exactly what he expected from the largest academy. However, Director Kim suspected that Suho might not have expected such a large amount. She casually asked him how much he would honestly want. Suho thought for a moment, then smiled. He suggested 300 million won, considering the rewards of being the top student and the size of Nexus Academy. He pointed out that 300 million won wasn't much for a big academy like Nexus. Director Kim looked surprised at the amount, but after a moment, she nodded, agreeing to his proposal. All right, Director Kim said, nodding. She made an offer to Suho. If he passed as the top test taker, she would pay him 300 million won. She suggested they draft a contract, and for now, she asked Suho to take a look around the academy. The scene shifted to a new location near a clock tower, as evening turned into night. Suho admired the sight of the vast academy grounds, thinking about how huge Nexus was. It seemed even bigger than an amusement park. He realized that once he enrolled, he wouldn't have to worry about anything. Nearby, a man laughed, clearly excited about the academy, saying it was the largest in South Korea. As Suho and the man walked together, Suho's thoughts wandered. He noticed someone off in the distance, training on the playground. It was hard to see clearly, but it looked like a student. The man guiding him commented that the person training was Dehan, the most dedicated student. Suho raised an eyebrow and asked, "Is he training like that every day?" The man nodded, confirming that Dehan trained at this hour regularly. Suho watched as Dehan practiced with a weapon, swinging it precisely. The man called out to Dehan, reminding him that while practice was important, he also needed to take care of his body. Dehan turned toward them, smiling confidently, and said that, as a third-year student, he needed to work even harder. Suho watched Dehan closely and immediately recognized him. He remembered forming raid parties with Dehan in his previous life. Back then, Dehan had become the top tanker in the country, famous for his incredible mental strength and defense. It was unfortunate that the role of pure tankers had faded over time. Suho's eyes fell on the battle axe Dehan was holding. It was different from the shield that had suited him so well in the past. It seemed Dehan hadn't yet found his true calling. Suho saw this as an opportunity. Since Dehan would eventually join Nexus in the future, Suho thought it would be smart to connect with him now and later bring him into the Korean Hunter Association. Suho smiled and introduced himself as Suho. They exchanged greetings, and Suho looked at the battle axe Dehan was holding. With curiosity, he asked if Dehan planned to use the axe as his main weapon. Dehan looked a bit unsure but explained enthusiastically that he aimed to be a melee user. Dehan had consulted others, and they had recommended the battle axe. They told him that weapons like that needed to match one's physique from the beginning, and in terms of destructive power, nothing could match a battle axe. Suho then asked if Dehan had only been using the battle axe, and Dehan nodded. He admitted that he was a bit slow to learn and that it had taken him 2 years to become proficient with it. Suho felt a bit lost for words and suddenly had a slight headache. He thought to himself that the real problem was that the battle axe didn't match Dehan's natural abilities. He wasn't sure if it was persistence or just stubbornness, but Dehan should have switched weapons earlier if he wasn't improving. Dehan noticed Suho was deep in thought and asked if something was wrong. Suho, still serious, thought about how the largest academy in the country seemed surprisingly lax. He then suggested Dehan should use a weapon he felt comfortable with. After all, players could adjust their stats, and with the skill correction effect, they could quickly improve proficiency. Suho pointed out that the battle axe didn't seem to suit Dehan. Dehan seemed confused, so Suho explained that the fact it had taken Dehan 2 years to get good with the battle axe showed a lack of synergy between Dehan and the weapon. Suho explained further, while the battle axe was powerful, the delay after each attack was too long. If there were no way to deal with that gap, Dehan would be vulnerable to counterattacks. He also noted that Dehan's large size made him difficult to protect by a tank if he was using a heavy weapon like the battle axe. Dehan was surprised by Suho's observations. He admitted that he'd been using the battle axe for 3 years and now felt like all that time might have been wasted. Suho reassured him, saying that if Dehan had been able to handle an unsuitable weapon for so long, it was likely that his true skills were more suited for being a tank. A tank? Dehan repeated, clearly surprised. Suho nodded and suggested Dehan try using a kite shield on his left arm and a one-handed bludgeon in his right hand. He added that Dehan's practical scores would probably improve significantly with this change. Dehan hesitated, asking if it wasn't too late to switch, especially with the test the next day. Suho asked him what he thought was the most important role in a party. Dehan guessed it was the mage, but Suho shook his head. He explained that the real core of a party was the tank, who had to draw aggro and protect the mage and healer for everything to function properly. Suho encouraged Dehan to wield a shield and use another weapon to control crowds in various ways. Dehan nodded slowly, starting to understand the reasoning. Dehan smiled and said he would give it a try. Suho praised him for not getting discouraged and for making such a smart decision so quickly. Dehan thanked Suho and walked away, eager to practice. As Dehan left, the man guiding Suho turned to him and asked if he was an instructor. Suho looked surprised and shook his head, saying he wasn't. The man then commented that Suho seemed to have a deep understanding of weapon synergy and hunter advice, which was unusual for someone without a license. Suho smiled and replied that he wasn't an instructor, but he knew a bit about that area. Wanting to change the subject, he asked if the contract was ready, since some time had passed. The man nodded, saying he had just received a call about it and suggested they head back to the director's office. The scene shifted to the next day, under a clear morning sky. The South Korea Hunter Association was busy with examinees, all holding their weapons and getting ready for the hunter's license test. Everyone looked like they were in peak condition, except for one person. Suho, the lone conqueror of the gate, sat there looking exhausted. He muttered to himself that he was tired from wandering around too much the day before. Around him, many people had gathered. Candidates were lined up, waiting for their turn to take the preliminary drug test, which was meant to catch any instances of doping. The announcer's voice echoed through the facility, telling everyone to line up by their assigned numbers. Suho, already tired from the long day, sighed inwardly and rubbed his temple. Although the doping test was necessary, it felt like an extra burden on top of everything else. He looked up, and his eyes briefly glowed blue, showing his special ability. Suho knew that drug tests alone wouldn't catch everything. Those who cheated often use skill buffs, not just conventional drugs, to gain an unfair advantage. His eyes scanned the room, and he noticed a glow around several people, indicating that they had been buffed far beyond the normal level 5 of a test taker. These weren't just average candidates. Their magical energy was much stronger because of the buffs. A system notification flashed before his eyes, congratulating him on mastering magic detection rank B. This new skill made his perception sharper, making it even easier to spot those who were cheating. Suho frowned, his mood darkening. It was disappointing to see so many people abusing buffs, even though the use of such abilities for cheating hadn't yet become widely known. Suho made a decision right then that something had to be done about it. His gaze moved up to the balcony, where he saw team leader young Chulmin waving at him excitedly. Suho allowed himself a small smile. At least there was one person he could trust here. As Suho waited, he overheard some of the other candidates talking among themselves. They were complaining about how difficult the written exam was, with one candidate worrying that they might need to retake it. Another agreed, saying that the exam was insanely hard. Suho couldn't help but feel a little smug. Thanks to the Library of Memories, he had sailed through the exam without any trouble. He almost felt like a cheater himself, but for a very different reason. Just then, a familiar voice called out to him, snapping him out of his thoughts. Suho looked up to see Chulmin approaching with a warm and friendly expression. Chulmin asked how the test had gone, clearly curious. Suho just shrugged and said he thought he could pass it. Chulmin chuckled, commenting on Suho's confidence. He added that word had spread that this year's written exam had been the hardest one yet. Then, Chulmin got more serious, mentioning Suho's earlier comment about buff checks. He asked Suho what he had meant by that. Suho nodded thoughtfully and explained that while there were measures in place to prevent doping, like urine tests, blood tests, and confiscating belongings, he had noticed there were no checks for skill-related cheating. He suggested that conducting a magic detection scan could help spot anyone using illegal buffs. Chulmin's eyes widened slightly, and he thanked Suho for the information. He promised to look into it before the practical test began. As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at Suho. Chulmin expressed that he personally hoped Suho would succeed, saying he would love to work with him in the association. He encouraged Suho to do his best in the practical test. Suho nodded, appreciating the encouragement. It felt good to know someone was rooting for him. Just then, the loudspeaker crackled to life, drawing everyone's attention. The announcement informed the candidates that the test would be delayed by 2 hours due to issues with the dive capsules. They were told to have lunch in the cafeteria and wait in the lounge or training area for a while. Suho sighed in relief. The delay would give Chulmin more time to implement the buff check, which might make the test fairer for everyone. With 1,200 candidates and a passing rate under 10%, Suho guessed that the cheater purge could bring the pass rate down even further, maybe to 7%. But that would mean the candidates who passed were truly the best, and Suho liked the idea of being surrounded by top talent. He decided to use the extra time to keep an eye on the other candidates. Maybe there was someone among them worth noticing. Suddenly, Suho's attention was drawn to a commotion. A young man was approaching a much larger candidate, challenging him to a sparring match. The young man's voice was loud enough to attract everyone's attention as he insisted on having a match. The larger man looked clearly annoyed, demanding to know who the challenger was and telling him to get lost. But the challenger persisted, saying he didn't want to fight, just spar. He taunted the larger man, implying he was scared to show his skills. Suho watched with mild amusement. It was always interesting to see how hunters interacted. Sometimes, a small confrontation could reveal a lot about a person's true character. The larger man, clearly agitated, muttered under his breath, calling the challenger a nuisance and telling him to leave. The larger man added that he had no interest in picking a fight with a weakling. The young man, however, refused to back down. He took a step forward, suggesting that he might just attack first. With the tension rising, the young man lunged aggressively at the larger candidate, forcing the big man to react. The clash was sudden. The young man swung his sword powerfully toward his opponent. But before the blow could connect, Suho stepped in, blocking the sword with his own. The larger man looked at Suho in surprise, asking if he had lost his mind. Suho remained calm and assured the man that he would handle the challenger, and that there was no need for things to escalate further. The challenger, clearly agitated, demanded to know who Suho was. Suho explained that he was just another test-taker, and that nothing good would come from getting involved in a fight. He suggested the bigger man leave it to him to handle the situation. The larger man huffed in frustration, muttering that he didn't care either way, and turned away. But the young man wasn't satisfied. He asked Suho why he was interfering, his irritation clear in his voice. Suho smiled and introduced himself as Suho, remarking that it seemed like the young man was looking for a sparring partner. He offered to be that partner instead. The young man sneered, dismissing Suho as weak and saying he had no interest in sparring with someone like him. Suho's eyes widened slightly at the insult. He was a bit taken aback by the comment. The young man, now more confident, mocked Suho further, suggesting that the earlier block had just been luck and warning him not to get cocky. Suho looked thoughtful for a moment, then tilted his head and asked if the young man was scared. The young man's face twisted with anger, and he demanded to know what Suho had just said. Suho repeated himself calmly, suggesting that it seemed like the young man was too scared to spar with him. The provocation worked, and the young man, now furious, declared that he was ready to teach Suho a lesson. He had been bored anyway, surrounded by cowards, and now Suho had just made himself the perfect target to be a punching bag. Suho smiled, pleased that the young man had accepted his challenge. Around them, people began murmuring, suggesting they should head to the sparring arena and get the supervisor's approval for an official match. The group moved to a large, empty arena, bright and open, with spectators casually gathering in the stands to watch. Some onlookers shook their heads, commenting on how unnecessary it was to cause a scene on such an important day. Others dismissed the participants as attention seekers. An official stepped forward as Suho and the young man prepared for the sparring match. The official explained that only training weapons provided by the association would be allowed and that he would stop the match if things got out of hand. He then gave a quick signal, declaring the sparring match to begin. The two competitors faced each other, each wielding a wooden sword. The atmosphere grew tense as the two opponents engaged in a rapid exchange, their movements quick and powerful. Park Yong, the young man, swung his sword aggressively, trying to overpower Suho with sheer force. But Suho moved with practiced ease, blocking each strike with precision while keeping a close eye on his opponent. Frustrated, Park Yong shouted that he would tear Suho apart. He lunged forward again, but Suho easily blocked the attack. Suho looked at him with a mix of surprise and disappointment, asking, "Why are you so weak?" Park Yong's expression turned to one of disdain as he remarked that his opponent was hardly worth the effort. Enraged, Park Yong began shouting insults at Suho, his rage evident in every word. Suho, feeling the tension thick in the air, took a moment to study the person in front of him. That's when the memories hit him. He recognized Park Yong. The young swordsman wasn't just any competitor, he was someone Suho had encountered before. Park Yong was a skilled swordsman, known for his fierce energy and his eyes burning with an insatiable thirst for power. Suho recalled the red mist that would swirl around him, a sign of the intense desire for strength that fueled his every move. Once, Park Young had been driven by the desire to become stronger, always seeking out the fiercest opponents in order to hone his skills. But over time, his obsession with power had led him down a darker path, turning him into a feared hunter-killer. Relentless in his pursuit of dominance, Park Young had lost himself in his quest. Suho's gaze narrowed as he recognized the same fire in Park Young's eyes. This was a man who could be so much more, but only if he didn't allow that thirst for power to consume him. Suho knew he had to intervene before Park Young made the same mistakes that had led to his downfall in the past. He smirked, the memories of their previous encounters flashing in his mind. Park Young had been formidable before, but Suho now saw the raw, unrefined nature of his skills. He wasn't yet the powerhouse Suho remembered. He was still struggling, still lacking the experience and refinement that would turn him into a true master. Suho sighed. It was strange to see Park Young here, in this test arena, in such a state. Despite his raw power, the swordsman still lacked control. Suho moved swiftly, stepping forward and landing a solid kick to Park Young's chest, sending him flying backward across the arena. Park Young's fall was dramatic, his body crashing to the ground with a loud thud. Suho remained standing, his expression bored as he looked down at his opponent. He couldn't help but mock Park Young's earlier confident words, thinking to himself that he had expected more from him. Park Young struggled to his feet, eyes wide with disbelief and pain. His breathing was heavy as he looked at Suho, still trying to process the strength he had just witnessed. His voice was thick with frustration as he demanded to know how Suho possessed such strength. Suho merely shrugged, a casual smile on his face as he suggested that rushing at him wouldn't work. He asked Park Young if he really wanted to continue, observing his stance. Suho quickly realized that this was likely Park Young's first time facing a level 10 opponent, as the strongest he'd probably fought before had been a level 5. Despite the setback, Park Young wasn't discouraged. A smirk appeared on his lips as he saw something intriguing in Suho, something he hadn't encountered in a long time. He remarked that now he understood why Suho had been so relaxed. The tension in the air thickened as Park Young prepared himself for another round. His grip on his sword tightened, and his eyes gleamed with a renewed determination. He declared that he would give it his all this time. Suho watched him carefully as Park Young began to gather his energy. A red aura swirled around him, and Suho couldn't help but smile, almost amused, as if humoring a child. With a shout, Park Young launched himself at Suho, his sword cutting through the air with intense force. The two clashed in a blur of rapid movements. The sound of their weapons striking echoed across the arena, each swing carrying the weight of their power. For a moment, Park Young seemed to push Suho back, their energies colliding like waves crashing against a rock. Suho could feel the weight behind Park Young's strikes, acknowledging that they were definitely heavier than before. Park Young, panting, sneered at Suho, his frustration clear as he asked if Suho would continue to act so relaxed. His red aura flared up even more, intensifying as he prepared for a decisive blow. He roared, daring Suho to stop his next attack. Suho's eyes widened slightly as Park Young assumed a new stance. He recognized it immediately. It was the dragon sword technique, the technique Suho knew all too well. With a powerful shout, Park Young launched his attack. His sword came down with lightning speed, aiming straight for Suho. The collision of their forces caused a massive explosion, blinding light filling the arena. For a moment, it seemed like Park Young had succeeded. He stood panting, a smug smile on his face as he muttered to himself that he had won. But as the light faded, Suho remained standing, his sword held firmly in his hand, having blocked the attack with ease. He sighed lightly and grinned, meeting Park Young's shocked gaze. He commented that he had blocked the strike without much effort. He could even do it with his eyes closed. Park Young's eyes were wide with disbelief. He stammered, trying to process how Suho had managed to stop him. Suho, however, quickly analyzed the attack. It wasn't truly the dragon sword technique, not yet. What Park Young had used was a basic sword technique, though with some flair. Wounded in his pride, Park Young let out a furious shout, calling Suho a bastard. But Suho didn't react to the insult. Instead, he simply stood ready for the next round. The fight raged on, with Park Yong attacking with relentless force. His sword swung with all the power he could muster, the red energy around him growing brighter with each strike. Suho was momentarily pushed back, but he remained calm, carefully watching for an opening. When Park Yong saw Suho being forced back, he believed he had found his opportunity. He lunged forward, throwing everything he had into one final strike. Suho, however, blocked it effortlessly, as if it was nothing. Before Park Yong could react, Suho stepped forward and delivered a swift punch to his jaw. Park Yong stumbled backward, his head spinning from the force of the blow. Park Yong staggered, his vision swimming from the punch. He muttered in disbelief, struggling to stay upright, wondering how Suho had managed it. Suho simply shook his head, remarking that Park Yong's attacks were too slow. Without a second word, Suho watched as Park Yong flew across the arena, landing with a thud. He took a moment to breathe, realizing it was time to finish this. He didn't want to break Park Yong's spirit too much. There was no need to cause any more damage to his confidence. The arena went quiet. Suho stood still and composed while Park Yong lay on the ground, unconscious. Suho considered what had just happened. Park Yong had potential, but his obsession with power was his downfall. Suho reflected on his past life and how things had turned out for Park Yong. He couldn't let history repeat itself, not this time. The past was filled with regrets, but the present offered a chance to change things. Suho knew Park Yong's fixation on him would make him obsessed until he managed to defeat him. But Suho was confident that would never happen. Suho thought the testing center would become quieter now, and with that in mind, he called out for the supervisor. The supervisor responded, clearly shocked, but he quickly got a handle on the situation. Suho explained he'd accidentally knocked Park Yong out and requested the supervisor take care of him until he woke up. The supervisor, nervous but understanding, promised to handle it. Suho nodded and turned his attention to the test area, where technicians were hard at work. The high-tech lab was filled with activity, and there were dive capsules set up in rows. Suho observed closely, noting the presence of more skilled technicians than usual. He suspected that some of them might be undercover doping inspectors, keeping an eye out for candidates who might be using illegal buffs. Suho overheard a nearby conversation between a technician and a candidate. The technician was calming the candidate, explaining that they weren't compatible with the current capsule and directing them to another. Suho found it odd but didn't think much of it. It was then his turn to undergo the test. A technician gestured for him to lie down in one of the capsules. Suho did so without hesitation. The technician gave him instructions, advising him to press a button if he felt any discomfort or unusual sensations during the dive. Suho nodded to show he understood. The technician initiated the process, and the capsule's interface lit up, showing the dive progress. A voice from the system announced that the Hunter Practical Test program was now active. The progress bar showed as the connection to Suho's consciousness was established. Once completed, the system confirmed that the healer practical test scenario was now starting. The environment around Suho shifted as the test began. Suho focused his mind, preparing himself for the challenge ahead. This was a test not just of his fighting skills, but his potential to be a healer, an integral role in any party. He steadied his breath, ready for what was to come. Suho found himself standing in the middle of a desolate, reddish cityscape. The buildings around him were crumbling, debris scattered everywhere, and the entire place gave off an eerie, lifeless vibe. He couldn't help but think that this exam was notoriously difficult, especially given the low pass rate for healers. As he took in the ruined surroundings, his attention was drawn to a young girl kneeling on the ground, crying. She appeared to be injured, and instinctively, Suho moved toward her. The whole scene felt unnervingly real, with distant screams echoing in the air, adding to the grim atmosphere. Suho's mind raced as he took in the devastation around him. How had the Great Hunter Association managed to create such an intense, chaotic scenario? It felt less like an exam and more like an ordeal designed to break you. He muttered to himself, bitterly noting that the association had no sense of moderation. The test seemed tailored to traumatize candidates, and Suho felt a wave of fatigue and frustration creep over him. Sighing deeply, he clenched his fist. He knew why healers were so highly valued. They were always at the heart of the chaos, expected to provide life-saving support even in the most dire of situations. Healers had to be strong, not in the way of warriors or mages, but in their resilience and selflessness. It was a role that required sacrifice. But that didn't make it any less daunting. The practical test was the true measure of a hunter's ability, where their class and skills were truly put to the test. For combatants, warriors, mages, archers, it was all about fighting, surviving, and defeating as many enemies as possible. The scenarios were constantly shifting, with different criteria for passing each year. It wasn't just about winning, it was about how well they handled various threats, the number of enemies they took down, and how long they survived. But for healers, the test was different. It wasn't about defeating enemies or outlasting opponents. It was about selflessness and sacrifice. A healer who could perform well in combat was important, but what mattered more was their willingness to risk their life for others, to protect and save those in need, no matter the cost. Suho understood that this was the essence of healing. The score was never just about magical proficiency, it was about putting others before yourself, even if it meant dying in the process. He braced himself, knowing what the test would likely demand of him. Healers often had to sacrifice themselves for their patients in this simulation. Healers who died trying to save someone were often the ones who scored the highest. It was a challenge unlike anything faced by combat-oriented classes. The thought of dying for the sake of the test didn't sit well with Suho, but he knew the system had revived him once before. If necessary, he would bend the rules. As he approached the sword embedded in the ground nearby, Suho's lips curled into a faint smile. The notion of being expected to die willingly for the test seemed absurd, but if it came down to it, he would find a way to survive. He wasn't just any healer. Suddenly, desperate cries filled the air, snapping Suho out of his thoughts. He turned sharply, listening intently to the screams that seemed to reverberate all around him. But when he looked, all he saw was death. Bodies littered the ground, fallen figures frozen in terror, their faces locked in their final moments of agony. The entire simulation area felt like a battlefield, where no hope remained and only one survivor was left standing. Suho moved closer to the girl he had seen earlier. Kneeling beside her, he took a moment to assess the situation. The girl's eyes were still wide open, filled with fear and uncertainty. Suho crouched down beside her, gently asking if she was okay as he examined her injuries. Her voice trembled as she struggled to speak, warning him in a hushed tone that the enemies would return and they needed to leave before it was too late. Suho gave her a reassuring smile, shaking his head. He told her that rescue teams were on the way, that she would be safe soon, and that he'd protect her until they arrived. His resolve solidified in that moment. He would protect her, no matter what. Back in the real world, the exam facility was a hive of activity. Pods filled the room, each occupied by an examinee immersed in their own simulation. One test taker stepped out of his pod, rubbing his neck in discomfort, muttering to himself that he could have done more. His expression was a mix of exhaustion and disappointment. A staff member, a woman in a neat uniform, offered him a warm smile and thanked him for his effort, instructing him to gather his belongings and head home. The man nodded, still lost in his thoughts as he made his way out. Nearby, his results flashed on a screen. Kong Jin Young, class, archer, time, 9 minutes, 4 seconds. The woman glanced at the scores, sighing as she noted how low they were for this season. The difficulty must have been particularly high this year, she murmured, before asking another staff member, Director Shin, about the status of Suho's simulation. Director Shin glanced at his screen and answered that Suho had been in his pod for quite some time. The woman was surprised. "It's been 30 minutes, she remarked, noting that most candidates usually spent no more than 15 minutes in the simulation. She leaned closer to the screen, confirming the time, 30 minutes and 21 seconds. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Who is this person? Both Director Shin and the woman turned their attention to the real-time feed of Suho's simulation. On the screen, Suho was wielding a sword, cutting down monsters with ease, all while keeping the injured girl safe. The woman, impressed, commented that he was a fantastic fighter and asked if he was a warrior. Director Shin shook his head, pointing to the screen. No, he's actually a healer. The woman scoffed, clearly disbelieving. A healer? But he's holding a sword. Director Shin motioned for her to look more closely. As she did, she saw that Suho wasn't just fighting. He was seamlessly blending in healing magic, pausing between each sword swing to mend the girl's wounds and protect her from the advancing creatures. His movements were precise, and his attention never wavered from the injured girl. The woman couldn't help but be stunned. This is incredible. A healer fighting like this? She paused, then questioned, isn't he supposed to be disqualified for not dying? I thought they usually wanted the healer to sacrifice themselves. Director Shin explained that there was no reason for disqualification. The goal for a healer is to protect the patient to the very end. That's what Suho is doing, and he's doing it perfectly. He's fulfilling all the requirements of the test. The screen showed Suho blocking more monster attacks, staying by the girl's side, never abandoning her. He kept healing her at every opportunity, his focus never shifting from his patient's well-being. The woman watched in awe as Suho fought with such skill while ensuring the girl stayed safe, her injuries healing with each passing moment. Director Shin highlighted that Suho was fulfilling all the necessary criteria for the test. He was staying close to his patient, healing her when necessary, and putting his life at risk to protect her. Since he met all the conditions, there was no reason for him to be disqualified. Even the practical system itself did not intervene. The woman nodded, slowly realizing that the top candidate in this practical exam had likely already been determined. In the simulation, Suho stood in the now darkened, ruined landscape, his sword tightly gripped in his hands. Several small green lizard-like creatures emerged from the shadows, their movements hostile and quick. Suho surveyed them calmly, unsheathing his sword in one fluid motion. As the creatures charged toward him, he responded with precision, slicing through all of them in a single strike. He muttered to himself, feeling that it wasn't quite enough. His movements weren't fast enough. He needed to be quicker. So, he pushed himself further, speeding up his attacks. His body moved fluidly, evading their strikes as he sliced through them with a grace and power that spoke of years of experience. As the last creature fell, a system notification flashed before him. The system acknowledged Suho's exceptional grasp of the footplay technique and congratulated him for mastering it. Suho smiled with satisfaction. Even in this virtual reality, the system was able to detect his skill level. He knew how the system operated, monitoring his movements, acknowledging his mastery, and rewarding his progression. Though the experience gains were slower here compared to real physical exertion, it was still an ideal training environment. As Suho continued to fight, he felt a surge of progress. Along with his mastery of footplay, he upgraded all the swordsmanship skills he had gained to rank A. It wasn't providing experience points or items, but the feeling of improvement was rewarding enough. Another notification flashed, congratulating him for upgrading his horizontal slash to a rank. Suho envisioned his skill set as a grid, considering the potential growth of his abilities. If he could upgrade every fundamental sword skill to a rank or higher, he knew he could eventually access a technique as powerful as Park Yong's Dragon Sword technique. Suddenly, the system notification changed. It pulsed with a brilliant, glowing energy, unlike any notification he had seen before. Light enveloped Suho as the system informed him that his understanding of swordsmanship surpassed anyone else's. The system was impressed with his unique approach and offered to integrate his fundamental sword techniques and footplay into a new skill. Once registered, this new skill would have its own rank, and he could even name it himself. Suho's eyes gleamed with determination as a satisfied smile spread across his face. This was the moment he had been waiting for. With a calm, assured voice, he whispered, "Welcome back, my sword, my guardian sword." Suho stood in front of the bright digital screen, his eyes reflecting its light as the system's message appeared. The message asked if Guardian Sword was the right name for the new skill he had created. Suho gave a small nod, a smirk on his face, confirming that it was the correct name. The system immediately responded, congratulating him on mastering the skill perfectly. The screen grew brighter as energy swirled around him, surrounding him in a shining display of light and power. A new skill was born, and it was called Guardian Sword Rank S. Suho's expression stayed confident and proud as he looked at the digital screen, which showed the extra benefits of his achievement. His swordsmanship and footwork skills were now 50% better. Then came a surprising bonus. The system also gave him Sword Mastery, ranked S. Sword Mastery was a rare privilege, given only to those who truly understood the blade. It removed any limits on learning or using sword skills, and it made all swords more effective, boosting his techniques by another 50%. Suho thought about this, gripping his sword with pride. In his past life, it had taken him over 10 years to achieve this level of power. But now, with his knowledge, it had come much faster. His worth had grown, and he felt that things were about to get much more exciting. Suddenly, his senses snapped back to the present. A group of terrifying monsters approached him. Their sharp teeth were visible, and drool dripped from their mouths as they drew closer. Suho stared at them calmly, noticing how many there were. He knew the number of monsters for the test was set, and he had already gained everything he wanted. He was ready to leave, but there was only one way out. He tightly gripped his sword, his face showing determination. There were two ways to end the test. He could either be killed by the monsters, or find another way. To Suho, the choice was obvious. A grin spread across his face as he looked at the monsters, deciding he would defeat them all. Outside, a group of people had gathered around a screen connected to Suho's pod. The screen flashed a new message, catching everyone's attention. It said that all the monsters for the test had been eliminated, and that the program should be restarted. The room went quiet for a moment. Then, people began murmuring in surprise. One person couldn't believe what had just happened. Another nodded, amazed, saying that this was the first time in history that something like this had occurred during a practical test. Someone else praised Suho for healing the patient. An examiner sighed, saying there was no point in looking at the rankings for this test anymore. A few days later, at Hexagon Guild headquarters, a different scene was unfolding. Inside the headquarters, a group of people sat in a meeting room, looking very confident. One of them confidently stated that their candidate would be the top student this year. Someone else agreed, excitedly talking about all the effort that had gone into raising Ki-hyun, the candidate, and confidently said that this year, it would be Hexagon, not Prime, that would take the top spot. Suddenly, a projector screen turned on, displaying a congratulatory message from the South Korean Hunter Association. The message showed the top candidates, and Suho's name appeared proudly at the top of the list. The names of other candidates followed, but Ki-hyun's name wasn't there. Confusion spread in the room. One person exclaimed in shock, asking who Suho was, while another murmured in panic, wondering where Ki-hyun was. One person, holding a phone, stared at the screen as a call came in. The caller ID showed the guild master's name, and they panicked, worried the guild master was calling. Meanwhile, in a car, Suho's phone buzzed, and Chulmin's voice came through, warm and friendly. Chulmin apologized for not congratulating Suho immediately after the announcement, explaining that he had been busy. Suho's smile grew wider as he listened, feeling genuinely appreciative. He thanked Chulmin, saying his success was all thanks to him. Chulmin chuckled, clearly proud, and pointed out that Suho hadn't just passed, he had scored the highest. He also mentioned that because of Suho, many cheaters involved in skill doping had been caught, which would lead to stronger testing rules in the future. Suho agreed, saying that tests should always be fair. Chulmin then paused for a moment, sounding thoughtful, and asked if Suho was still interested in joining the Korean Hunter Association. Suho's expression became serious as he replied that, while he might stay in the guild for a while, his goal remained the same. He would join the Great Hunter Association no matter what. Chulmin thanked him, sounding relieved, and promised he would contact Suho as soon as the test schedule or recruitment information was available. Suho agreed and then mentioned it was lunchtime, asking Chulmin to make sure he ate well, even though he was busy. Chulmin laughed warmly, wishing Suho the same. After the call ended, Suho held his phone for a moment, a concerned look on his face. He wondered aloud if Chulmin was okay, since his voice had sounded a little hoarse. Suho then shifted his thoughts, expecting another call soon. Just then, his phone screen lit up with an incoming call. Suho's eyes sharpened, and he prepared to answer, muttering to himself that it was as he had expected before picking up the phone. It was Director Kim Soo-yi, who congratulated Suho on his success. She told him that the payment had been made as per the contract and then asked if Suho was interested in joining the Nexus Guild, promising that he would receive better treatment there than any other guild. Suho's response was polite but cautious, asking how much Director Kim was willing to offer with her proposal. Director Kim's voice stayed enthusiastic as she assured him that she would do her best to meet his expectations. She mentioned that, as an Academy scholarship student who graduated at the top, adjusting the terms would be easy. She then suggested they meet in person to discuss things further. Suho thanked her for the offer but explained that he had personal plans for the day. He promised to check his schedule and get back to her, adding that, as a Nexus scholarship student, joining Nexus would look better for him than joining another guild. Director Kim's excitement came through even over the phone as she agreed, urging him not to sign any contract with another guild in the meantime and promised to fit her schedule around his. Suho chuckled softly, assuring her he would see her soon. After hanging up, Suho smiled to himself, amused by her excitement, still able to hear her enthusiasm in the phone call. The taxi slowed down and stopped. The driver informed Suho that they had arrived. Suho nodded and thanked him before stepping out of the car. He looked ahead at the old market in front of him, determination clear in his eyes. He thought back to everything he had accomplished so far, passing the test, getting his license, and receiving the deposit. The street was busy, filled with people going about their day. Suho took a deep breath, his gaze firm as he focused on what was left to do. It was time to start farming. This was Lighthouse General Market. Some time passed, and Suho reminded himself that he had already bought everything he needed for his new life as a hunter. Now, all that was left was to find a weapon. He entered a small, slightly run-down shop filled with various weapons. Suho approached the counter where the shopkeeper stood. He greeted the shopkeeper, already scanning the collection of weapons. The shopkeeper looked at him curiously and asked what he was looking for. With a polite smile, Suho explained that he had just become a hunter and was looking for a lightweight weapon he could use. He knew this would be tricky, finding something good without a lot of money. He had to be careful. The shopkeeper thought for a moment before pointing toward a section at the back, saying that the items there were a bit cheaper. Suho nodded gratefully, thanking him, and walked toward the shelves, which looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Dust covered most of the weapons, making them seem forgotten. He ran his fingers over one particularly dusty blade, amused by how much dust had collected on it. He carefully examined each weapon, noticing how many of the low-grade weapons lacked verified information. It seemed as if their true value had yet to be discovered. But Suho knew that even unverified weapons might have hidden potential. Holding a spear carefully, Suho thought to himself that some weapons needed to go through a process of liberation before they could truly become powerful. Such weapons usually emitted an aura that seemed to ask for recognition. He believed that not many players would notice such a weapon in a place like this. He could sense something special about the spear he was holding. Slowly, he closed his eyes and focused. A notification appeared, and he felt a subtle tingling of energy. The system announced that magic detection had been activated. Suho smiled faintly, sensing the swirling blue energy around the spear. He thought to himself that he had found it. The scene around him shifted. Now, Suho stood alone in a sunny park, surrounded by green trees. The spear rested in his hand, and he looked at it with a mix of confidence and anticipation. If the shopkeeper knew what he had just sold, he would certainly regret it one day. Suho imagined the man lamenting over his decision to let the spear go for so little. But that was a thought for another time. Right now, Suho had work to do. With a light grip on the spear, he told himself it was time to begin. He took a deep breath, and the calm, peaceful atmosphere around him grew tense. The energy around him started to gather, drawn to the spear, creating a powerful aura around both the spear and Suho. The system's voice echoed in his mind, saying that magical power was being supplied. The consciousness of the weapon began to awaken, and Suho could feel it. The surge of energy caught him by surprise, causing his eyes to widen. He grunted in pain as he felt the pressure. The spear was alive with energy, pulsating and drawing more and more of Suho's magic power. He struggled to hold on to it, realizing in alarm that it was absorbing far more energy than he had expected. Suho thought about how quickly the spear was draining his magic power, panic setting in as he felt his strength slipping away. The power of the spear surged dramatically, nearly overwhelming him. In desperation, Suho released his grip. The spear clattered to the ground, and he collapsed, breathless and exhausted. He thought to himself that if he had been even a little slower, he might have fainted from losing all his magic power. His gaze shifted to the spear, now lying on the ground, its energy dormant again. He sat up, reflecting on what had just happened. He figured that to fully awaken the spear, his magic stat would need to be at least 100. He let out a small sigh, already thinking about his next move. Even though he couldn't use the spear right now, it would be incredibly useful in the future. He smiled slightly, determination in his eyes, silently promising to level up quickly and wake the spear. Meanwhile, under a bright sky, a tall building with a prominent PBS sign stood. Inside, Zhou Jinhui sat at a cluttered desk, focused on his laptop. His routine was interrupted by the sudden ringing of his phone. Jinhui answered, sounding only mildly curious. The voice on the other end spoke with familiarity, introducing himself as Suho, and confirming that Jinhui was the reporter from PBS. Jinhui blinked in surprise, pausing for a moment as he tried to place the name. He asked who Suho was, repeating the name to himself. Suddenly, realization struck him. He was speaking to the top candidate, Suho. Suho confirmed calmly that he was indeed Suho, adding that he was also the solo raider of the unprecedented gate that had recently appeared at Syndrome Station. Jinhui's eyes widened in shock as he realized Suho was talking about the Syndrome incident. He leaned back in his chair, trying to process what he had just heard. His thoughts raced as he considered the possibility that Suho had cleared the unprecedented gate even before obtaining his hunter license. Jinhui marveled at the idea, wondering just how much of a monster Suho must be. Clearing his throat, he asked, "Why specifically contact me?" Suho explained confidently that he had come across Jinhui's blog during his search. He mentioned that Jinhui was known as a Golden Spoon kid but had chosen to work as a journalist, which, in his eyes, suggested a strong sense of professional pride. Suho then added that he had many plans moving forward and a lot of newsworthy material to share. He proposed that Jinhui become his exclusive reporter, though Jinhui's skeptical expression was clear even over the phone. Jinhui asked dryly, "You want to keep a rich reporter as your subordinate?" He paused, thinking as he assessed the man on the other end of the line. He considered that Suho might just be some odd guy who thought he was special. He replied that while he understood Suho's point, this kind of approach didn't sit well with him. Even though Jinhui was a reporter eager for good scoops, he had no intention of being anyone's subordinate. He stressed that what he wanted was a great partner, not a one-sided arrangement. He also clarified that he was mentioning this because it seemed like Suho was trying to boost his worth before joining a guild. Suho let out a short laugh and admitted that Jinhui wasn't entirely wrong. However, he explained that his aim wasn't to raise his worth, but rather to gain some fame. He also mentioned that he was thinking about joining the Hunter Association as a civil servant. Jinhui paused, his fingers freezing on his keyboard. "Wait, you're talking about the Korean Hunter Association?" he asked, clearly confused. He pointed out that gaining fame through publicity seemed more like something someone wanting to join a big guild would do, not a public servant hunter. He wondered if Suho was joking. Suho reassured him that he wasn't joking. His voice turned more resolute as he stated that he truly intended to join the Hunter Association and work in the field. Jinhui's skepticism only grew. He asked, "Are you one of those people with well-off parents who treat work like a hobby and go after prestige?" Suho's tone became more serious. He revealed that he was what people called a gate orphan, and that was why he was interested in public service. Conquering gates, he explained, was his ultimate goal in life. Jinhui blinked, surprised by the revelation. His thoughts were muddled. He wondered if Suho was being serious or if he was just another eccentric with wild ideas. After a moment, Jinhui sighed. He understood Suho's point, but he still wasn't interested in being his exclusive reporter. "I'll write the articles I want to write," Jinhui said, emphasizing his independence. Suho quickly responded, proposing a bet. He explained that he felt he needed to earn Jinhui's trust to win his partnership. As a hunter, he suggested proving himself through his skills. He added that he was planning to conquer the Tower of Challenge alone that very day. Jinhui's eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, are you really planning to clear the Tower of Challenge? He asked, the shock clear in his voice. The Tower of Challenge was known as impossible to clear, even with a team, yet Suho was saying he intended to do it alone. Suho's confidence didn't waver. Yes, I'll do it, he confirmed. If I succeed, you'll agree to become my exclusive reporter. Jinhui stared at his phone, caught between disbelief and curiosity. Suho was certainly an odd person, but there was something about his determination that made it hard to dismiss him entirely. Jinhui stared at his phone, caught between disbelief and curiosity. And Suho was certainly an odd character, but there was something about his determination that was hard to ignore. Suho, on the other hand, thought about Jinhui, recalling his reputation as a top broadcaster and a reporter for PBS. He knew that Jinhui's pride was immense, and that his family had plenty of money. Jinhui was famous for never accepting requests, always sticking to his own standards. Suho also remembered that, in his previous life, he had collaborated with Jinhui several times. Jinhui's exceptional reporting skills and his remarkable ability to shape public opinion were well known. However, his overwhelming talent eventually led to him being cast aside. He disappeared from the scene, pushed out by factional conflicts in the industry. In any group, a sharp thorn was often seen as a threat, and Jinhui was that thorn. His forceful personality had made him a target, causing him to retire earlier than expected. Suho was determined not to let Jinhui disappear like that again. If he succeeded in conquering the Tower of Challenge alone, Suho felt that he should earn Jinhui's trust and win him over as his exclusive and personal reporter. Jinhui appeared shocked, but Suho could tell that he was considering the offer. He emphasized that having a close reporter would be beneficial for both of them. After a moment of silence, Jinhui sighed and reluctantly agreed. If you manage to conquer the Tower of Challenge alone, I'll do everything I can as a reporter to help you. Suho smiled confidently, standing in front of the tower, feeling optimistic. He thanked Jinhui, telling him they would meet later and ending the call. With determination in his eyes, Suho took a deep breath, ready to begin. Meanwhile, in his office, Jinhui sat alone, frustration bubbling up inside him. He muttered to himself about how annoying Suho was and how the man really got under his skin. Sitting at his desk, he thought over Suho's sudden and bold proposition. He wondered why Suho had made such an outrageous offer. Despite his annoyance, Jinhui couldn't deny that there was something intriguing about the situation. He stared at his phone, the reflective screen mirroring his conflicted expression. He began to contemplate the sincerity in Suho's words. It didn't sound like a lie, and he didn't believe Suho was a scammer. After a long pause, Jinhui leaned back in his chair, his mind swirling with thoughts. He felt like he was on the verge of losing control. With an exasperated sigh, he acknowledged to himself that this whole situation was starting to drive him crazy. After another moment, he sat up, looking resigned. He told himself that, no matter what happened, it didn't matter. If Suho's claims are true, then that's great, Jinhui mused. If not, then so be it. There's no real downside to this gamble. Resolute, he stood up and walked towards the door. He decided he would see where this gamble led him. Meanwhile, at the Tower of Challenge, the area was bustling with people eager to take on its challenges. Suho stood before the tower, speaking with someone as he observed the crowd. He asked the guard at the entrance if he could enter now, showing his ID card. The guard confirmed that Suho could enter, but hesitated before asking, "Are you alone?" Suho nodded and explained that he intended to attempt the challenge solo. The guard looked at him with some doubt and caution. "It's not impossible," the guard said slowly, "but it's unusual for someone who has just passed the hunter exam to take on the tower alone. Even the lower levels can be dangerous. It might be better to form a party." Suho simply smiled and reassured the guard that he was fine and preferred to be alone. The guard, though still worried, relented and allowed him to proceed. He informed Suho of the entry fee and told him to pay once he received the invoice. Suho nodded, thanking the guard, and promised to be careful. He acknowledged the warning to return if things became impossible. As he entered the tower, he thought about the purpose of the Tower of Challenge, which was also known as the hunting ground. This public gate, managed by the country, was designed to allow players below level 20 to challenge themselves and improve their skills. Suho was ready to face whatever lay ahead. He placed his hands on the large door, feeling determined. With his level reset, he knew there was no better place to test himself. He pushed the door open with resolve, revealing a bright light inside. The air grew tense with anticipation. The system's voice echoed in his mind, confirming that he had entered the Tower of Challenge. It reminded him that he could forfeit at any time and that if he declared his withdrawal, he would be immediately transported back to the entrance. Suho summoned his sword, focusing on the task ahead. The system announced that the first floor challenge had begun. A large green slime monster appeared before him, and Suho let out a deep sigh. He quickly readied himself to face the approaching slime. While the sight of it had been intimidating when he first entered the tower, he now assessed the situation with experience. The slime was a low-level creature, and its damage was minimal at Suho's level. However, he knew that if he allowed it to get too close or caught up in its antics, it could become troublesome. With swift determination, Suho charged at the slime. He had a plan in mind. The quickest way to deal with it was to destroy its core. He lunged forward and, with a decisive strike, shattered the slime's core. The creature collapsed, but Suho knew this wasn't the end. From the slime's remains, smaller slimes began to emerge. Suho observed them with a hint of annoyance. The core had split and regenerated into multiple smaller creatures. While they were weaker due to the division, their regenerative ability was what made party play a common recommendation for the Tower of Challenge. Suho, however, didn't hesitate. He knew this was just the beginning. He rushed forward, his sword slicing through the air as he took on the smaller slimes. Dodging their attacks with quick footwork, Suho unleashed a flurry of strikes. He skillfully maneuvered, leaping into the air to avoid incoming tentacle strikes and land powerful blows. His movements were fluid, each swing of his sword precise and calculated. The slimes retaliated, their massive tentacles lashing out toward him. Suho ducked and dodged with remarkable agility, finding the perfect moments to strike. His determination never wavered as he continued to dismantle the creatures, cutting through them with expert precision. At one point, he evaded an attack and leapt onto a tentacle, gripping it tightly. He held firm as the beast swung wildly, using the leverage to his advantage. Hanging in the air, Suho showed no fear or hesitation. Calmly, he swung his sword, cutting through the slimes with a final, decisive series of strikes. With the last of the slimes defeated, Suho looked up at the towering structure above him. There were still 48 floors left to conquer, and he knew there was no time to rest. With his sword in hand and his resolve stronger than ever, Suho steeled himself for the next challenge. A blue system notification appeared in front of him, announcing that the second floor challenge had begun. Inside the Tower of Challenge, Suho was thinking about the records that had been set before him. In his past life, the highest record for the tower was 48 floors, which was achieved by a team. Right now, the highest record was only 29 floors, and that was also completed with a team. Suho knew how hard the tower could be, especially when going alone. Without any hesitation, he quickly moved forward and fought an undead enemy that was blocking his way. Usually, the tower was tackled with a group of hunters. The strength of the monsters in the tower depended on the number of challengers, and the experience gained was shared among the group. It was often smarter and safer to challenge the tower as a team because it made progress more manageable. But Suho wasn't interested in doing things the normal way. He was confident in his skills and preferred to handle things his way. Surrounded by defeated enemies that gave off a faint blue glow, Suho looked up as a notification appeared. After a short time, the system told him he had cleared the 18th floor. The system then asked if he wanted to move on to the 19th floor. Without hesitation, Suho agreed. He moved forward with confidence, excitement in his eyes. The 19th floor was different from the others. Instead of facing many enemies, there was just one. This meant the enemy would be much stronger. Suho's feet moved quickly as he ran, energy flowing through him. The single monster on the 19th floor was powerful. But the good part was that Suho only had to defeat one enemy to clear the floor. Suddenly, a giant figure appeared in the distance. It was a huge orc, its muscular body covered in red hair. Without wasting any time, Suho charged at it, drawing his sword and pushing forward with determination. He attacked the monster with a powerful strike, shouting a challenge as he did. His sword glowed, cutting through the air and hitting the orc with an unstoppable force. Blood splattered as the orc fell, defeated by Suho's quick and strong attack. The system notified him of his success. "You have conquered the 19th floor." Another message popped up, asking if he wanted to move on to the 20th floor. Suho stood still for a moment, looking at the fallen orc. He decided to wait and not answer the prompt just yet. He took a moment to calm himself, looking at the remains of the orc. Unlike the previous floors, something felt different about the 19th. Normally, monsters in the tower would disappear right after they were defeated, leaving no trace behind. However, the red gain, this particular enemy, didn't vanish immediately. Suho walked over to the large tusk that the creature had dropped, a smile appearing on his face as he picked it up. He realized that this was exactly what he had been searching for. As he examined the tusk closely, he understood that it wasn't something that could be used on its own. It had a specific purpose. Holding the tusk, Suho activated his magic detection ability, causing a shimmering aura to surround him. The area glowed softly, revealing a hidden spot on the nearby wall. He murmured to himself that he had found it and focused on a glowing indentation in the stone. He approached the wall and placed the tusk into the indentation. With a low rumble, a portal appeared, swirling with cosmic energy. Suho's eyes lit up in satisfaction. He realized that this was the subspace fortress of the fortress king, ᴄᴏᴘᴘыឫ. He knew that defeating the red gain had given him access to this special subspace. Unlike other items that created limited subspaces, this fortress allowed living beings to enter and exit freely. It was a rare and valuable power. Without wasting any time, Suho stepped through the portal. He found himself in a dim cave, lit by the glow of a floating orb. As he walked closer to the orb, he noticed it was getting brighter. The system spoke again, telling him that the previous owner of the subspace fortress had died and asking if he would become the new owner. Suho answered without hesitation, placing his hand on the glowing orb. The system congratulated him on becoming the new owner of the subspace fortress. The light in his palm grew brighter, swirling around him as he closed his hand, feeling the power of his new ownership surge through him. Suho realized that it wasn't just an item, it was a skill now. This was a unique feature. The fortress wasn't just a place to store things, it was now part of him, linked to his magic. He could sense that the subspace would evolve and grow based on his abilities. Suddenly, everything around him glowed, and the environment shifted. The system announced, "The subspace fortress has been reconstructed." Suho shielded his eyes from the burst of light, and when the light faded and he lowered his hand, he found himself standing in a lavish modern room. He hadn't expected it to have this feature, and he looked around in surprise. He thought to himself that it felt like he could just go home after fighting monsters. It was even better than he had imagined. The space seemed to be designed just for him, and he appreciated how convenient it was. The system explained that the fortress would grow in size and usefulness as his magic power increased. Suho smiled, feeling proud that he had prevented ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ from gaining the skill. He remembered how, in his past life, the smuggler had caused trouble by using the fortress to hide everything from illegal items to stolen treasures, and even kidnapped people. Now, all that potential was in the right hands. Suho thought to himself that by stopping the fortress king from ever emerging and securing the fortress for himself, he had gotten a great deal. His confidence grew even stronger. With his new fortress and renewed determination, Suho was ready for whatever came next. He decided it was time to keep moving up. His voice was filled with resolve as he declared that the Tower of Challenge awaited, and he was determined to conquer every floor. Outside the Tower of Challenge, Jin Hui stood quietly, looking at his phone as he scrolled through an article. The headline immediately caught his attention, "On Suho." The article praised Suho's remarkable performance in the recent Awakener rankings, where he had outperformed even the most experienced challengers. It also mentioned Nexus, which was getting a lot of attention lately. Jin Hui thought to himself that many students would likely be drawn to Nexus after reading this article, which would only increase its popularity. But then he remembered that Suho had mentioned wanting to join the Korean Hunter Association. However, the article suggested that Nexus Publishing was already working to bring him on board, showing their confidence in securing him before anyone else could. Jin Hui wondered how far Suho had gone in the tower by now. He thought about it for a moment when suddenly a notification from the system startled him. The 30th floor has been conquered. Jin Hui blinked in shock. That was fast. He wondered if Suho was really there when the record was broken. This was sure to be a hot update. Then, another system message popped up, saying that the highest record for the Tower of Challenge had been updated, and a new challenger was now taking on the 31st floor. People around him began to murmur, speculating which guild might be behind the new record. Some wondered if a large guild had sent a party to conquer the floor, but Jin Hui, with growing suspicion, narrowed his eyes. Could it be Suho? The system continued to show updates. The 31st floor has now been conquered. Jin Hui's jaw tightened. Only a short time had passed since the challenge began, and now the 31st floor was conquered. If it was really Suho, his progress was even faster than Jin Hui had expected. He had initially thought Suho relied on flashy moves and luck, but now it was clear, Suho was no ordinary awakener. At the top of the tower, a crystal glowed, and the system announced, the challenger's name is Player in Suho. Now, Player in Suho had started to challenge the 32nd floor. Jin Hui's jaw dropped as he stood there, feeling a mix of awe and disbelief. He couldn't help but think to himself that he would always be linked to Suho from now on. Meanwhile, inside Nexus Academy, Director Kim was reading the new article, her eyes wide in shock. The man beside her quickly explained that Suho was setting a new record in real time. It was hard to believe, but Director Kim's mind was already racing with possibilities. She adjusted her glasses, her thoughts sharp and focused. To bring someone like Suho to Nexus, they would need to offer a sum beyond their wildest dreams. Without wasting any time, she instructed her team to contact the president and office manager and head straight to headquarters. She wouldn't let anyone else take Suho, because he was the one who would become Nexus's ace. Back with Suho, he continued his climb in the tower, making steady progress. Soon, the system notified him that he had conquered the 48th floor. Suho, slightly out of breath, knelt on the ground with his sword embedded in the floor. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, his muscles aching from the strain. Rushing through the tower was certainly tough. The system then congratulated him for achieving a great accomplishment and told him that he would be awarded 5 bonus stats for his success. Suho smiled and opened his status window, his eyes lingering on the numbers before him. He was now level 39, and what truly stood out to him were his stats. The best stat he could possibly see was right there. He let out a quiet chuckle. Reaching level 39 felt like a significant milestone. But what really impressed him was the bonus stats he received. Gaining 5 bonus stats every time he broke a record felt almost too good to be true. To lift his spirits even further, he decided to allocate the points to his magic. Awakening his spear was his current priority, and boosting his magic seemed to be the best path forward. A bright light filled the air as the system updated his stats. Feeling more energized than before, Suho stood up. The final challenge was ahead, and he was ready to face it. In front of him, a massive crystal appeared, glowing with intense light. This crystal marked the highest point of the tower, signaling that the challenge for the 49th floor had begun. Suho's heart raced as he steeled himself for what was to come. The crystal's energy filled the arena, and a dark, swirling mass of power formed at the center. A great roar echoed across the battlefield, and from the shadows emerged the tower dragon, a level 49 boss, the guardian of this floor. Its massive wings spread wide, casting a terrifying shadow over the arena. Despite the overwhelming power radiating from the dragon, Suho remained calm. Level 49? He thought. This is completely out of balance. The dragon, though not pure-blooded, was likely a dragonborn, and Suho knew how dangerous that could be. But he didn't flinch. As the dragon let out another roar, Suho felt his determination harden. The fight ahead would be brutal, but he had come this far. There was no turning back now. Well, what can I do? I came here to conquer it, Suho thought, gripping his sword tightly. The final battle began with a crash as Suho charged forward, his resolve stronger than ever. He would face the dragon and take the final step in his journey to become the first human to conquer this tower of challenge. The dragon's roar echoed through the battlefield as Suho's attack landed, but it barely made a dent. The creature's thick scales absorbed the blow without flinching. It thrashed violently, attempting to shake off the strike, its eyes glowing with fury as it glared down at Suho, its prey. Suho had expected the creature to be tough, but this was on another level. The sheer power of the dragon was beyond anything he had imagined, and his weapon had done little to harm it. The dragon charged at Suho, and the sheer force of its movement cracked the ground beneath it. Suho couldn't believe how quickly such a massive creature moved. It's almost cheating, he thought. He had no choice but to evade, gripping his weapon tightly as he adjusted his stance, readying himself for the next attack. Despite the dragon's enormous size and strength, Suho remained determined. The dragon's growl rumbled through the air, a deep, menacing sound. It took another step forward, its shadow growing larger and larger over Suho. Although the creature was clearly enraged, Suho didn't back down. He knew this fight was far from over. The dragon's eyes narrowed, glowing with a furious energy. Suho could feel the tension building in the air as the ground beneath them trembled. Cracks began to form around the creature as it gathered its power, a sign of an imminent attack. Suho knew that whatever was coming next would be devastating. Suddenly, the dragon let out a deafening roar. A shockwave rippled across the battlefield, sending rocks and debris flying in all directions. Suho reacted instantly, darting to the side to avoid the incoming rubble. Suho's instincts kicked in as he leapt to the side, narrowly dodging a jagged rock that flew toward him. His movements were quick and precise, honed over years of battle. The dragon was powerful, but Suho's agility kept him one step ahead. As the dust settled, Suho crouched behind a broken wall, carefully observing the dragon. The creature prowled, its glowing eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. Suho knew he had to remain hidden. He kept his focus, analyzing the dragon's next move. The creature's level wasn't as high as he had feared, but its durability was still a huge issue. The dragon's scales were incredibly tough, and regular attacks wouldn't be enough to penetrate them. Suho knew he needed to find a weak spot, something he could exploit for a decisive blow. As he observed the dragon's movements, his eyes shifted to its tail. There, barely visible, was a single gray scale. Suho's heart skipped a beat. It was the reverse scale, the dragon's most vulnerable point. The weak spot was right there, hidden but unmistakable. He knew striking it would deal massive damage, but timing would be everything. Crouching lower behind the broken wall, Suho took a deep breath. He knew the dragon was still searching for him, unaware of his discovery. The creature's heavy footsteps shook the ground as it prowled, eyes scanning for any movement. Suho's pulse quickened. His mind was entirely focused on the task at hand. He gripped his weapon tightly, readying himself for the right moment. He couldn't afford to miss. The battle had reached its tipping point, and everything depended on whether or not he could land the strike at the perfect moment. As the dragon continued its search, Suho's body tensed, preparing to spring into action. The time to strike had come. Suho made a rapid, agile jump from behind the crumbling wall, darting forward with precision. His movements were swift, calculated. His eyes locked onto the faint, glowing mark on the dragon's tail. This was the weak point, the one spot that could change the course of the battle. He readied his sword, the cool metal steady in his grip. His gaze never wavered. Everything had led to this single strike. Suho swung with all his strength. The blade collided with the reverse scale in a powerful blow, and he pushed with every ounce of his might, attempting to dislodge the scale. The impact reverberated through the air. The dragon's eyes widened in shock and pain. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze, the dragon paralyzed in realization. Then, chaos erupted. The dragon let out a deafening roar, its pain turning into a fury-driven rage. Suho felt the backlash instantly, thrown backward by the sheer force of the dragon's violent movements. Suho tumbled, barely managing to keep a grip on his weapon as the dragon thrashed violently. The ground beneath them shook with each movement, and the air was thick with the raw fury of the beast. He landed roughly, but he managed to steady himself just in time to see the dragon's eyes flare with rage. As expected, this won't end easily, Suho thought, his breathing heavy. He could feel the weight of the battle pressing on him. The longer this fight went on, the more disadvantageous it became. The dragon's power was relentless, and with each passing moment, the gap between their strengths seemed to widen. Suho knew he had no time to waste. There was no room for hesitation now. Determination burned in his eyes as he gathered his resolve. His muscles ached, and his body was slick with sweat, but his mind remained sharp and clear. He had to destroy the reverse scale. It was his only chance. "Take this," he roared, driving his sword with all his might into the dragon's scales. His arms strained, every bit of energy he had left poured into the strike. The blade bit into the dragon's tough hide, and the dragon let out another bellowing roar. Energy swirled around it in a violent spiral, and a deep purple radiance began to spread from its body, crackling with intense power. Suho knew the dragon wasn't done yet. The battle was far from over. The dragon's roar reverberated through the arena, and Suho braced himself for the incoming attack. But instead of an immediate strike, he was met with a system notification. The tower dragon uses dragon fear. Instantly, Suho felt a crushing pressure weighing down on him, a suffocating force that seemed to chill his very soul. His expression remained resolute, but a cold sweat began to bead on his forehead. The fear washed over him, sinking deep into his bones, slowing his every movement. It felt like invisible chains were binding his body, holding him in place. His legs grew heavy, and every step felt like wading through mud. The weight of the fear crushed him, seeping into his mind, fogging his thoughts. His head pounded, his vision swam, and the world around him seemed to distort. Echoes of the dragon's roar reverberated in his ears, blending into a cacophony of chaos. Another notification appeared. "You have fallen into a state of fear. Your muscles have become stiff." Suho grit his teeth, struggling against the overwhelming sensation. His body was paralyzed with terror, but he couldn't afford to fall now. "Cure," he thought desperately, activating his skill. He could feel his energy drain as he fought to rid himself of the fear's grip. A new notification flashed before him. "Cure activated. But it is a high-level fear. It cannot be cancelled." Suho's heart sank. The fear was too powerful. Even his skill couldn't rid him of it. His current capabilities weren't enough to fight it off. The dragon's massive form shifted, its aura glowing with an even more menacing intensity. The ground trembled beneath the dragon's weight, each step like a thunderclap. Suho steadied himself, his body stiff and weak under the crushing fear. The realization hit him hard. The dragon was far from finished, and its fury had only grown. The dragon's eyes glowed with rage, and Suho knew he had to act quickly. The situation was getting more dangerous, and he was running out of time. Suddenly, the dragon twisted its massive body, and with a powerful whip of its tail, it slammed into the wall, trying to knock Suho off. Suho barely managed to hang on, but the force of the impact sent a shockwave through his entire body. He could feel his grip slipping, and the situation was becoming critical. Both Suho and the dragon were driven by an unyielding determination, neither willing to back down. The next moment, Suho was flung through a portal by the dragon's powerful movement. He was tossed violently across space and crashed heavily onto the ground. Pain shot through Suho's body as he rolled to a stop. He knew he needed to act fast. He forced himself to move despite the pain. Quickly, he summoned a blue potion from his inventory and drank it in one swift gulp. As he drank, the dragon's roar echoed from the other side of the portal. The soothing energy from the potion flooded his body, and a notification appeared. "You have consumed a purification potion." Fear and hallucination states lifted. Suho collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. He had survived the worst, and the overwhelming tension in his body started to ease. He took a moment to catch his breath and assess the situation. He realized he was safe for now. The portal skill had worked as a perfect escape, and the dragon couldn't follow him into the subspace fortress. He let out a strained chuckle, thinking to himself that he was lucky he'd bought a purification potion from the general market just in case. He hadn't expected to use it so soon. Suho wiped the sweat from his forehead, his body still exhausted. He knew that simply dispelling the dragon's fear wouldn't be enough to protect him for long. Cure spells wouldn't work. He couldn't keep running back to the fortress to use purification potions repeatedly. It was clear he needed a new plan. He needed to think of something that could end this battle once and for all. With a determined look in his eyes, Suho summoned a guitar, a broom, and an old book from his inventory. A new idea began to form in his mind. He thought of the mad pulverization scholar. Maybe he could get help from that powerful, eccentric figure. Mystical energy surrounded Suho as a magical circle appeared. He focused on the skill book in his hands and began reading it carefully. The system confirmed his progress, indicating that Suho had learned the basic combination formula from the book. A large jar appeared in front of Suho, and a surge of confidence filled him as he inspected it. He thought to himself that, despite the seemingly basic combination formula, the success was guaranteed. An absolute formula always worked, no matter how simple. These items, often referred to as junk, were nothing special at first glance, but for those who knew how to use them, they were hidden treasures. Suho began placing the items into the jar with focused precision. His heart raced as the system's announcement echoed in his mind. The combination process had begun. He watched intently as the jar glowed brighter, its light growing more intense. Then, without warning, it burst into a golden radiance, filling the entire room with a warm glow. The system informed him that the combination had succeeded. As the light began to fade, Suho looked down at the jar to see a rare treasure floating within. A dazzling ring shimmered with a mystical aura, the energy surrounding it almost palpable. The system confirmed that he had created a rare treasure, even though the formula used was from the lowest level. Suho's smile widened as he reached out and held the ring in his hand. The sense of accomplishment swelled in his chest. The system provided more details. It was the first mumu, an S+ grade item. When equipped, the ring would always apply colorless solitude. Suho admired the ring as he slid it onto his finger, feeling the surge of power flow through him. He knew that by creating the first ever item, he would receive bonus stats. The fact that Mumu's base rank was S meant that the first ever title pushed it to S+. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how fortunate he was to be able to make use of such treasures. He marveled at how the privileges of a regressor allowed him to grow stronger, faster, and more capable. The first Mumu was the kind of treasure that would grow with him, becoming even more powerful as he did. This item would be a key asset on his journey. With a satisfied nod, Suho summoned his status window. He knew it was time to continue his preparations. He allocated 4 points to magic, while distributing the rest into strength and stamina. As the system confirmed his choices, Suho watched with satisfaction as his magic stat reached 100, and then continued to rise. The system congratulated him, marking his magic stat as red for the first time. Suho smiled, noting the significance of the moment. He was still below level 50, but his growth was happening at an impressive pace. The color system ranked stats, with each new level requiring 100 points to progress. Reaching red meant his magic stat had surpassed the usual limits for his level. While his purple rank had required 700 points before his regression, and he was still a long way from achieving that, Suho felt a new level of determination. He could now aim for a rank beyond purple, and the possibility excited him. With the stat distribution completed, Suho raised his hand to summon the next item he needed, the spear. The system's announcement confirmed the summoning of an old spear. Suho gripped it tightly, his gaze hardening with resolve. It was time to awaken the spear. He channeled his magical power into the weapon, focusing every ounce of his energy on it. The room lit up with a blinding light as the spear began to respond. Its consciousness slowly began to stir, and Suho could feel the drain on his mana as the spear absorbed his energy. Suho grimaced, feeling the strain intensify as the spear's power continued to grow. He had expected this, The spear's absorption capacity was immense, nearly overwhelming him. He gritted his teeth, trying to push through the exhaustion. The spear glowed brighter with every passing moment, its energy surging. Suho could sense that it was close to fully awakening. He poured every remaining drop of his mana into the weapon, determined that just a little more effort would bring the spear to life. The reaction was building. Suho knew he was on the cusp of something big. He just needed that final push. Finally, the system announced that the unknown spear had gained consciousness, congratulating Suho on partially awakening it. To his satisfaction, Suho had obtained the Shadow Spear with an A+ rank. A confident smile spread across his face as his eyes narrowed. The next challenge was ready to begin. The Shadow Spear glowed with a foreboding purple light, tendrils of swirling shadow wrapping around its shaft like living things. Suho paused for a moment, taking in the weapon's dark power. A system notification appeared, explaining the spear's origins. It had been one of the Shadow Lord's treasures, crafted from the bones of a shadow beast. The spear's potential was staggering. It allowed the wielder to summon it from the shadows at will and even repair it using surrounding darkness. Suho felt a surge of pride and satisfaction. If Zhang Piangho had the subspace fortress, then the Shadow Lord, a monarch of spirits, had possessed this spear. The two were comparable figures, both notorious in their own right. Zhang Piangho for his vast influence and the Shadow Lord for his criminal notoriety. Suho couldn't help but feel fortunate that the spear had fallen into his hands before anyone else could use it for evil again. Now, standing in an opulent room, he was ready to test its power. He swung it effortlessly, watching as the shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and swirling with his every movement. He extended his hand, and the spear returned to him instantly. Shadow Summon, he whispered. The ability to recall the spear at will would prove invaluable, especially with the challenges ahead. As if on cue, a portal opened before him, revealing a massive dragon resting in a barren landscape. Its scales gleamed ominously in the pale light, and Suho could immediately tell that a direct confrontation with the beast could end badly. The dragon's power radiated even from this distance, but it was currently resting, an opportunity. With no time to waste, Suho decided to capitalize on the element of surprise and strike first. His foot sparked with energy as he dashed forward, closing the distance in an instant. He stopped at a perfect position, his grip tightening around the shadow spear as he focused his magical energy into it. The shadows around him deepened, swirling faster and faster, gathering strength. His pulse quickened, a rush of excitement and resolve flooding his senses. This would be the moment that could shift the battle in his favor. With a swift motion, he charged forward, aiming for the dragon's weakest point. Shadow Strike! Suho shouted as he swung the spear down with all his strength. The weapon released a powerful surge of energy, a torrent of darkness and force that surged toward the dragon. The impact was devastating, shaking the ground beneath them. The dragon's eyes snapped open, blazing with fury as it let out a deafening roar. The sound reverberated through the air, a primal scream of rage and pain. Suho could see the dragon's scales quiver from the blow, a sign that his strike had done significant damage. But the tower dragon was far from finished. It reared its head back, eyes burning with wrath, and the air around it crackled with rising fury. Suho quickly leaped back, bracing for the dragon's retaliation, preparing himself for the battle that would come next. The dragon unleashed a wave of intense fear, its oppressive presence spreading through the area. Suho's instincts screamed for him to run, but he quickly dove into his subspace fortress just in time. Breathing heavily, he watched the massive creature through the portal, a smirk forming on his face as he gripped his shadow spear. Having avoided the fear's effects by entering the fortress, he planned to keep executing his hit-and-run tactic until the dragon fell. After a while, the dragon's eye glowed with malice, its rage building as Suho repeated his strategy. But this time, the dragon's reverse scale was cracked, and it was now on high alert, refusing to let its guard down. Suho realized his old strategy was no longer viable. It was time for a direct confrontation. He charged forward, threw his spear with precision, and pierced the dragon's defenses, driving it deep into its eye. Blood poured out as the dragon howled in pain, its body cracking under the strain, and it activated its fear skill. Suho felt the weight of the dragon's fear wash over him, threatening to overwhelm him, but he fought through it, summoning a burst of energy. He drank a purification potion, the blue liquid calming his nerves and clearing away the lingering fear. Grinning, Suho tightened his grip on the spear. "It won't work again, you fool," he shouted, his voice booming across the battlefield. With one final surge of power, he charged, focusing all his remaining strength into his sword, ready to land the decisive blow.